Okay. Let's see. Because it does say we're live. So I'm just going to make sure that everything's running. See the people come in, and I'm just looking at my second monitor. I'm going to make sure that we are live. What's going on, everybody? If you can, if we are live right now and you can see us and you can hear us, please let us know in the chat. And once people filter in and so forth, and we know we're working, we will get started. So let's just, let's see. I see comments saying live. Okay. Hey, can you guys hear us down there? Kerm, Rob, will you guys say howdy, and we'll see if you guys' mics are coming through as well.
Hey, what's up, chat? How's everybody doing today?
Happy Sunday, everybody. How is it going? Who's ready for this?
Okay. Loud and clear. Okay, yeah, but before we get started, for anybody new to the streams, I'm sure most of you know, but Rob and Kermit are great friends of the channel and great researchers. Rob himself, he is kind of a jack of all trades. I highly recommend his recent paper towards the end of 2025, Sub Rosa. Organized Secrecy, is that the subtitle, Rob?
Yeah.
And Kerm is a finance and money connoisseur, and his next huge step is to talk to Catherine Austin Fitts and have a legendary conversation about financing of legacy programs and so forth. So if you guys want to give a extend on those introductions real fast and let everybody know who you are, and we'll get started.
Kerm, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. How's it going, everyone? As Gerb says, I'm in this kind of for the finance kind of money angle, trying to map the relationships of how this cover-up's possible. A lot of the stuff that kind of Gerb looks at in his videos, but also just trying to understand how this stuff can be, withheld from Congress outside of legal oversight. So key in a lot of those discussions. And as Gerb said, very much would love to have an interview with Catherine Austin Fitts if she's watching this live stream. How's it going? Happy Sunday. I would love to talk to you. You can reach me at my Twitter, KermDog Entertainment. And I will, of course, bring Rob and Gerb as well, because they will ask some great questions, and I roll with them on a lot of this stuff. We've been to the hearings together. We've gone to SCU, Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, in Huntsville last year. That was super fun, and a lot of other events as well. So looking forward to it. I think we'll probably talk about this as well. We'll be attending Contact in the Desert this summer. So
yes, we will.
Very excited for that. Whole crew's going. We're going with the Night Shift group, which is I have their merch on right now. The good old TR3B. I think fans of the channel will know this craft quite well. So, I just love aliens. I love the government vehicles, the cover-up stuff, all the names, places, dates. It's interesting. And yeah, what a time to be alive, though. I mean, crazy stuff to talk about. Past 2 weeks have been insane, to say the least. But enough about me. Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say about myself. My name's Rob. You can find me at X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. It's still Twitter to me. It's still Twitter to me, damn it.
It's
me too, man.
Yeah, it's still Twitter.
But you can find me there at Burning Rob, as you see below me over here. I'm a researcher. I'm a consultant in the UAP field at this point. I know that's weird to say, but for the past 8 months or so, I've been doing freelance consulting for a bunch of creative development roles, both in television and film, as well as other forms of media. Somehow that is working out. So we're going to keep riding that as far as we can. So there's a bunch of stuff about that I can't talk about. What I can talk about is that, I do a lot of research for other folks, as well as writing, research pieces on my own. There's been a little bit of delay in that because I've been doing a lot of quote unquote private stuff. It's nothing crazy. It's just like creative dev, but it is really fun and exciting stuff. And I can't wait to do a lot more stuff that you guys are going to be able to see here soon. I'm going to be appearing on a couple other channels at some point. So hopefully you guys will be able to see that.
Awesome. Kerm, you got something to say before we launch?
I just want to say this real quick, not to glaze Rob super hard, but back in the day, we met in the trenches of Reddit, and I could not have imagined that we'd be here today. So I just want to say I'm super proud of my boy Rob. He does great work, great research. We worked together on a number of projects back in the day. This dude is a generational talent. That is no disrespect at all to the other generational talent as well. UAP Gerb, my homeboy, the original gangsta of UFO research, if you will, of the Zoomer generation. So, just happy to be here, guys, and very supportive of you both.
Thank you, Kerm. So as like a rough outline today, we haven't done a live in a long time, and of course, there's so much to talk about. And some of the major themes we'll try and hit on today is, of course, I posted on YouTube about a Q&A I'd like to do at the end, maybe 45 minutes to an hour of some questions. People submitted some, so we'll go through those. I got about 12 really good ones, and also maybe take some from the live chat. I would like to talk about some of my recent projects, specifically the Air Force project. We would, of course, like to talk about Donald Trump and his recent tweet about the revelations of the UFO files, as amorphous as that is. And I would also like to talk, and we'll probably let Rob spearhead a lot of this conversation because he was super excited about it. The 2027 stuff has kind of come back in the public zeitgeist. So touch on that a little bit. And I think Rob has some poignant things to say. Kill the Stigma podcast. Yeah, I do. I always keep an eye on chat. I do see your message there. So yeah, but what I do want to start with is, of course, the It's Probably Nothing tour that Jesse Michaels and Chris Ramsey put on. I was fortunate to be kind of a guest speaker, a guest host at two of the shows. The Austin show, I think Feb 9 or first week of February, and then the Montreal show, Feb 21, I think it was. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about that experience. Don't quote me on this because, of course, I am not the person who put on the show, and there was a tremendous amount of resources and logistics and so forth that go into the show. But I believe the Montreal show was recorded, and I would expect that to probably be on Chris Ramsey's channel within the next couple of weeks. I think that was recorded. Again, don't quote me on it. It might take longer because the production value was super, super, super high. And I do think they plan on doing more shows as well. The Austin show at the Paramount Theater, I do not think that was recorded. I think it was too difficult to work with the logistics for Chris and Jesse to coordinate recording with the Paramount Theater. I know that a lot of comics use that theater specifically for stand-up routines where people back their phones and so forth. But yeah, a quick version of my experience. Am I still live, guys? My camera froze for a moment. Okay, there we go.
You're good.
You're still good? Okay. Yeah, so the Austin show, that was a short notice show I came up to, and Chris and Jesse graciously flew me out to Austin. Until the day of the show, I had no idea who the guests were going to be. Chris and Jesse kept it pretty lock and key. I just knew that they wanted me to get on stage and kind of talk about what I like to talk about. So, of course, the Night Shift boys came there because I'm sure, as you guys know, Xander Jones did the music for the show. And one of the cool things he did is he mixed, almost took a mix of Jesse and Chris's themes for their channels and blended it into their own intro song, Hey Cat, and their own music. And it was super, super impressive. So I saw the Night Shift boys out there. Shout out to them, Clint, Xander, and of course, Dan Cleary, who's also a wonderful lad. So the morning of the show, I still don't know what to expect. And Chris calls me and he says, you need to keep this under wraps. But the other guest today on will be Bob Lazar and Luigi. So, one of the things I always talk about on the channel, and I'll still maintain, is I can't scrutinize or look at Bob's testimony unbiased or with a critical lens, mainly because as a child and growing up, I was always so infatuated with his testimony that it's hard for me to analyze some of the red flags with Bob that certainly exist and unanswered questions, such as his educational history and so forth. So where I am with Bob, I will always want to know as much as I can about his testimony, but I can't factor it into my investigations or use that as evidence, just because I'll be the first to admit I do not have the heart to analyze Bob without bias. But meeting him was, of course, it was kind of a childhood dream of mine. I'd always wanted to meet Bob Lazar, and Luigi Venditilli came on as well. And I know that summer 2025 is kind of the meme with Project Gravatar, but I do think it's coming out within the next couple of months. Trailer was
Luigi's a really cool dude. Is that true or not?
He's wonderful. I love Luigi so much, and I'll tell you a little more about Luigi in the Montreal situation, because I did get to sit down and watch the whole Project Gravatar documentary with the greatest UFC fighter of all time, George St. Pierre. So I got to watch that with George and with Luigi. And so we'll talk about that. But so the way the show went, Rob, I think we're getting a little bit of feedback from your mic. Did you hear that too, Kermit?
Oh,
just a little buzz.
A little bit.
So Jesse and Chris, one of the cool things they did at both of these shows, I don't know if it's going to continue, but they had a local experiencer on for each of the shows. So They kind of put the feelers out into the Austin community, the Montreal community, said, hey, who has had an anomalous experience with the subject of UFOs? And we'll come on stage to tell the tale. The Austin fella, he saw a disc-shaped craft. Jesse and Chris actually had an artist kind of create a rendition for it within the streets of Austin. It was really cool. But the Montreal fella, wait till we talk about that, because that was super interesting. But Jesse and Chris have me on. We just talked about the usual stuff. We talked about age of disclosure, of course, and some of the problems with that. We talked about, various figures in the subject of spearheading UFO discussion, and we'll talk about that stuff today. And then Chris thought it a bit cheeky to get out some acronym flashcards, and they weren't what you'd expect. There was one acronym on there that was easy money. I can't remember what it was, and then he was doing stuff like HTTPS, various HTML type acronyms, none of which I knew. But it was,
I know all those,
but it was all in good fun. It was all in good fun. And then what Chris says is we have a special guest, and we're going to play the Project Gravatar trailer, and introduces Luigi, says featuring Luigi Venditilli, and then takes a brief pause and says, and Bob Lazar. So, Bob comes out, I got to shake his hand, got to talk to him. There wasn't really anything new about Bob's testimony we talked about there on stage. It was mostly him doing a critical analysis of Project Gravatar, which kind of speaks to the skills of Luigi Venditilli. I did ask him about what he has to say to the people who try and claim that when Bob talked about S4, which of course I do think is a real facility by Papoose Lake, that people try and accuse him of manufacturing Tonopah test ranges at acknowledged Site 4. You guys are familiar with that, right?
Right.
Up in the TTR, the DOE's premier classified weapons testing range, there is an actually outdoor acknowledged Site 4, and that's been a criticism leveraged at Bob quite a bit. And we talked about that. He just did of course, no, and so forth. I didn't get a chance to talk to him anymore, which I really wish I would have. And even with the star power of Bob Lazar, I think the Montreal show was just a little more impactful for me. And here's why. I was out there a couple days. Jesse's podcast with Chris is out now, but we had a day of recording podcasts, which I think you guys are all really going to like to see. They're pretty darn special. I think I got a pretty good one with Chris. People will enjoy. But the next day with the show, met up with George St. Pierre. If you guys don't know him, he's the greatest UFC fighter of all time. He was a 2-division champion in welterweight, 170 pounds, and middleweight, 185 pounds. And 2 losses in the UFC, avenged both in devastating fashion. Just an all-around incredible fighter. I love George. I got to meet him at Luigi's studio. It was wonderful. He was such a nice guy. He presents himself as a really kind and humble human being, and he is exactly that person in real life. So ate lunch with him, got to watch with him. It was really special because a couple of times during Project Gravatar, George would kind of freak out and say, "Oh, is this real?" or some stuff like that. Project Gravatar also, I do think it is. I like Jeremy Corbell a lot, but I think it is a much better documentary than Jeremy's. I think Project Gravatar is really good, mainly because of the resources Luigi put into recreating S4 in a photorealistic sense in Blender.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's the 9 hangars that Bob claimed to have seen, the briefing room, the sports model operating in low performance mode during tests, Janet flights, Luigi painstakingly recreated everything in 1-to-1. And not only that, but would go back and look at weather patterns back in 1989 to try and specifically gather the exact aperture of the sun, exact position in the sky of the sun, cloud positioning, and so forth. So it's really, really good. There were a couple shots in the documentary I thought were absolutely wicked. It would be a slow panning. Yes, Project Gravatar is finished. I see that comment, and it's really it's awesome. There are slow panning shots going into the hatch of the sports model where there will be a ladder, where Bob claimed to have walked into the sports model. And there will be a CRT TV on there playing one of Bob's old interviews. And this was a creative way Luigi would use to get around copyright laws. But there's just some really creative filmmaking in there. And of course, I'll be the first to say I still think there are a couple missing pieces with Bob's testimony, mainly some of his education and some of the other stuff he's talked about. And, even people closest to Bob will admit that. I don't think the story is close to being fully told. I hope we get there someday, but the documentary is excellent, but don't expect it to conclusively prove that Bob is either lying or telling the truth. But fast forward to the show so I can wrap this up and we can actually have a conversation. Same type of format as the Austin show, but the experiencers, these were 2 individuals that saw a triangular craft over Rachel, Nevada, and they brought a video. And the video it's actually really interesting, the video they provided. There's a large black object hovering maybe 200-300 feet over the desert surface, about a couple miles away from the camera. It looks large enough and far enough away that at the first couple of glances, this does not appear to be, a bug in front of the camera, but it's a large stationary craft that, well, what appears to be a craft that stays there for quite a few minutes. I hope Chris posts that if he posts the Montreal show video, because it was really intriguing. They chat for a while about some interesting stuff. They bring me out. They do the same kind of acronym sheet. More I know, but they spelled DITRA wrong, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. They spelled it DITRA instead of DTRA.
Oof.
But the last acronym was GSP. So they let me introduce GSP, which was awesome. So GSP comes out.
Pretty cool.
We talk a ton about the UFO subject. He talks a little bit about his interest in ancient archaeology and kind of lost history and lost civilizations. He talks about an intriguing UFO experience he had with Rashad Evans and other UFC fighters. And the cool thing is, Chris Ramsey said that my UFO knowledge was equal only to my UFC knowledge. So George St. Pierre actually gave me some, quizzed me on UFC stuff. I got all the questions right. They weren't that hard, but that was cool. And it got to the point where, if you guys are familiar with George St. Pierre, his most famous line ever is his terrible attempt to trash talk. One of his opponents, Matt Hughes, won a fight. George St. Pierre got in the ring, took the microphone, and said, "I was not impressed with your performance." Have you guys seen that clip? It's super famous if you know GSP.
I think I'm familiar.
Well, when we're talking with GSP, he took the microphone and said, "I was impressed with your performance," to me. So that was, I hope we got that on camera, man.
That's awesome.
That was so
cool.
And then wrapping this up, Missile Man was there. Missile Man's a great friend. You guys know him. Super cool guy.
Yeah, that's our boy.
James Fox was there. His leg got mangled in a skiing accident, but it was great to see him.
Oh, gosh.
And then Chris and Jesse wanted to have actors kind of fulfill the role of a Nordic type. They couldn't really find anything. So they found two brothers who were both 7 feet tall and put them in bowler hats and suits to play Men in Black. And it was
awesome.
really funny. It was uncanny because Chris is a tall guy. He's like 6'2", but he's dwarfed by these guys. And it was really special. They have more shows planned. I hope they take it internationally because the show was great. And I saw some comments saying it was just an opportunity to make money. If that's what you think, I highly recommend, if we have the video of the Montreal show, to watch that through and maybe attend the show because it's really special. The production value is crazy, audience interaction and so forth. So with that long-winded thing, what do you guys want to talk about first? Let me stop yapping and let me hear from you guys.
I mean, look, I think Kermit came prepared with a couple things that he wanted to talk about. We could always delve into that. I have notes for a lot of things. We could go into breakdowns on your last couple of videos, whether it's the NRO or the Hidden Wing Edwards test or Edwards base video.
I'd love to talk about that too.
It's up to you. You're the captain here.
Well, I tell you what, guys, I do have a PowerPoint prepared. It does briefly cover kind of high level, kind of all the things that have been going on. Probably would be nice to maybe kick off with that. It should maybe only take maybe less than 10 minutes.
Sure, please.
Won't spend any crazy time on
You have control,
Okay.
share the screen. Are you saying PowerPoint kind of current events? Lead us into some discussions? Awesome. Yeah, let's do
current
it.
events, UFOs, conspiracy, Epstein, Iran. We're going to get into all of it. That's okay with you guys. All right.
Captain Kerm, the comments are saying. Show us what we're talking about. Yeah, for anyone in the chat too, GSP is just the shortened name for George St. Pierre, who's a legendary UFC fighter, greatest of all time. And he's super into the topic. If you've heard him on Joe Rogan, he loves talking about the subject. So incredible guy. But back to you, Kerm.
My bad, y'all. I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out how to get this to work. It's showing up on both screens. 1 second.
Colonel Kermit. Yeah.
Do not make me a colonel. I'm not a GS-15. I'd probably be like a GS-6.7. 6.7. Sorry, guys. That was kind of a dull joke.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, you know what? I can't really here. I'll just do this screen, share. All right. So I have notes.
Oh, let me pull it up. Sorry. That's my mistake, Kerm. Okay, there we go.
All good. Okay. Can you guys see it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So do you guys see my notes on the left on the side, or what's going on here?
Yes, we do.
Oh goodness. Okay, so the notes don't really help. I will say that because I'm not going to go off the notes. Goodness.
Do you maximize it for us?
Here we go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. All right. Because who doesn't like a good slideshow, right? All right. Year to date, 2026. I think everyone here in the chat knows pretty well what's going on right now. We'll get into, obviously, the UFO matters. I have a whole timeline to kind of break down that. Also, some interesting comments by Rep. Burleson I want to get into a little bit. But outside of UFOs, yeah. Outside of UFOs, though, crazy stuff going on. Obviously, we got the Epstein files, the Venezuela raid. I have a couple slides on that. Some ice problems, not talking about snow storms, talking about immigrations and customs enforcement, ICE. Mexico going crazy. We had a war with Iran on Friday, and then AI. All right, so right now, kind of a multi-front conspiracy war, kind of crazy. So we have the Epstein files that's kind of going on, active congressional investigations into that. Also some interesting stuff about 9/11, I think largely because of Lutnick's connections, but happy to see if there's any comments or questions about that. Not really here for that, though. Directed energy weapons is interesting. Some comments about Venezuela and the discombobulator. And then last, but certainly not least, some presidential comments by Trump and Obama about UFOs and a potential executive order. Also, Hillary might have been asked about aliens as well. We'll get into that.
We should absolutely discuss that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely meanwhile,
focus on the aliens.
Yes, I think we should focus on the aliens. But meanwhile, 2027. I know we've been talking a little bit about 2027, but seems that Microsoft is pricing in that white collar work is going to be gone by 2027. And I know we've seen this meme a lot, especially in the UFO community. But I mean, could you imagine a scenario where it's like massive unemployment and the government either is lying to us about a craft heading towards Earth or that there is a craft heading towards Earth, but all the same, that's all going on in the heat of massive societal
If I can
problems.
interject for a moment,
Yeah, what's up?
somebody raised a question with me. I want to say yesterday or the day before on Twitter, when I was mentioning some of the things that I'm doing with Claude Code with regards to like database building and stuff like that. Somebody asked, do you think that the legacy program has been utilizing artificial intelligence in some respect in a secret capacity, such as what we're seeing deployed today? I don't know what you guys think about that, but personally, I don't think so. I don't think that they use publicly accessible models in the same sense that like you or I would attempt to do that because they'd be too afraid of putting restricted data into the training data.
Yeah.
So if anything, they'd be using like smaller, more closed source models that are not as capable or as able to use like connectors and get online and things like that. You'd be worried about like data exfiltration.
Right. And their SAP-Fs and so forth are air gapped. These are completely closed systems.
I was going to say,
as Extropian mentioned as well, like they are using AI in the sense that like, like sentient, like NRO's like filtration system for exfiltrating, any sort of like intelligence data that might concern UAP or something of that nature is exfiltrated off of normal systems.
Right. And sentient, for all intents and purposes, at least I'm highly confident, is not a system used by legacy programs. This was an NRO system. Yeah. I think if I'm remembering correctly, the first sort of deployment of sentient was around 2010, first proof of concept. 2015, 2016, it was largely implicated. But I think when you read through the Immaculate Constellation documents and kind of distill what Matt Brown and those documents are stating, the NRO sentient platform was absolutely used for Immaculate Constellation, which is not a legacy program.
Well, I don't.
Right. That's part of that like NSC umbrella program.
Immaculate Constellation, it seems a little bit tricky. I personally think there are a couple possible options here. One, Immaculate Constellation is a retroactive SAP to try for certain elements of the National Security Council to get an understanding and get imagery and get intelligence on both non-human vehicles and derivative technologies. Or possibly this is also a National Security Council program that was utilized in the same ATIP vein to bring partial disclosure through just videos of vehicles and so forth. But then there are more questions about the derivative technologies and reproduction vehicles discussed in the document.
Yeah, I don't know about all that, just because I do remember there was like an email that was released as part of a FOIA dump where they were looking for any hits of like sentient and UFOs, UAP. And there
Mhm.
was an email that came out where basically there was like a NRO analyst or some official kind of in that level position that was like, yes, sentient is active, but it's not tasked on UAP information because we need a customer to do that. Do you guys remember that specific line
No,
or
not
that
off the top of my head.
Yes, but
Basic,
in
continue,
the
sorry.
same vein, in 2020 or 2021 NRO sentient highlights, there are there are instances that discuss sentient tracking tic tac shaped objects over various
Mhm.
oceans. So there is still a provable paper trail of sentient monitoring UFOs. Whether that was determined to be a prosaic system or not, we don't know. But sentient has trained on unknowns.
Okay, cool.
Gotcha.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt that much, Kerm. Go ahead.
No worries. I'm glad my 2027 alien meme caused such great discussion. So that's why I have the PowerPoint deck. Anyways, Epstein files. So this is a big one. This is kind of on everyone's radar right now, obviously. A little bit more than half documents, 3.5 million documents released, roughly 3 million remaining yet to be released. Obviously, very political, powerful figures have been named in these files: Bill Gates, Les Wexner, Prince Andrew, who's now got arrested by the UK. That was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Up here, I have some pictures. Nick Fuentes trying to sell a quarter zip with Jeff Epstein, saying he was a cool guy, and then him not being that cool. The discombobulator. This was kind of interesting. This came out of Venezuela. I just want to say, like, it's possible that Trump's probably conflating multiple different weapons packages kind of into one system, but at least from we'll call it unconfirmed sources on the ground, it seems like there was some type of advanced weapon that was used and probably gave us the edge. So shout out the discombobulator. It's interesting.
I do want to say a little bit about that, just in the
Go
sense
ahead.
that, like, if they did utilize a device like that, it had to have been in such a limited capacity that it didn't at least bathe the entire compound, because
Yeah.
we
No.
know for a fact that at least one of the helicopter pilots for the Blackhawks that went in there got pieced up by a machine gun and ended up being awarded a Medal of Honor at the State of the Union this week. So if those dudes were fully, microwave weapons, they probably weren't going to be operating machine guns. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think these were probably stationary or semi-portable targeted systems, right? I mean, I'm remembering back to 2012. I was pretty interested in some emergent Army and DoD technologies, talking about giving the individual soldier exoskeletons and so forth, and also microwave weaponry. Actually, as a quick hint, and then we'll let Kermit get back to it. In the next video I'm doing, I'm going to talk a little bit about some alleged UFO legacy program unacknowledged sites that there have been witness claims of individuals who approached the grounds or compounds of these installations and claim, dating back to 2020, they suffered effects that are comparable to discombobulator, or felt a severe mental haze and that their blood and eyes were boiling when they were noticed by security at these compounds. So I think that's going to be interesting to talk about that in the near future. I'm really excited. Okay, take it away, Kern.
No, that's very interesting, and I'm glad I have a discombobulator slide. Again, this is why
Probably
I put
more
the deck
excited
together.
than they were to experience that.
Yeah, no, it's still messed up that it happened. Iran, yeah, we bombed Iran. Situation's developing. In my opinion, I don't know. I've tweeted about this a couple of times. There was some dude posting on 4chan about how we were going to use alien technology in this imminent attack on Iran. Honestly, like, my take on it now is this guy was probably a LARP, purely on the concept of, like, we use cruise missiles, and, like, we probably wouldn't be using cruise missiles if we had the technology. But I don't know. My opinion doesn't really matter.
Just from like a former military person standpoint, and as someone who follows these things pretty high level, I would say, you don't use exotic technology in a non-peer conflict. And to be clear, Iran is not a peer adversary. They may have possessed certain peer adversary technologies at one point, but after the November, air wave or the airstrikes that Israel did, paired with what we did and everything else, their air defenses are highly depleted. I would I would be blown away if for some reason someone decided to jeopardize a special access program
Right.
for that.
Yeah, even without the deployment of
That makes
exotic
sense.
technologies, we still possess
Right.
dramatically asymmetric warfare advantages over Iran and
Yeah.
many other adversaries.
Yeah, I mean, you
Right.
want it,
And like
you want like
Necromac in chat said, you can't risk that getting stolen. What if it malfunctions? Like, to give that away? We already did that once with the RQ-170 in Iran, and that has had disastrous effects because
Mhm.
that's now why Shaheds are everywhere.
Now, Kerm, I think we're expecting Shrek on the next slide.
ladies and gentlemen, big time for UFOs. So now I have a little timeline here, breakdown of kind of just what all happened. So start off day after Valentine's Day, Obama's on Brian Tyler Cohen's podcast, gets asked about aliens, and he says, yeah, they're real, but they're not being kept at Area 51 unless there's this enormous conspiracy and they hit it from the presidents of the United States, which he's giving massive fan service to our special interest. A couple of days later, Trump on Fox, he was on Air Force One. He was asked about Trump's comment. He said Obama was not supposed to say that. He gave classified information. He's not supposed to do that. And then the rest of Trump's comments were kind of interesting, kind of weird. Some people commented that, Caroline Leavitt, his press secretary, was in the background of this shot here in this screenshot, and she's like smiling as he's talking about it. So it's like, what does that all really mean? And then towards the end of it, he's like, by the way, he was talking to Peter Ducey at Fox, and he's like, do you believe it? Do you believe it, Peter? So that was all kind of interesting. And it's like, what do you mean by classified information? Like, what part of what Obama said was classified? But in any case, that evening on the 19th, the White House then announced through Trump's social media accounts that he was going to direct the Secretary of War, or really just Secretary of Defense. I'm calling it DOD because I'm not saying War Department. So DOD and other agencies to begin releasing government files related to alien life and extraterrestrial life, UAP and UFOs. There were some questions within the UFO community of like, was there actually a legal mandate to back this up, or was this Trump just kind of saying all this stuff on Twitter ahead of like the State of the Union to try to drum up support? And what we saw is a couple of days later, so Pete Hegseth is on a factory floor. He's with some people from the press. And here is this. Is
hold on, let me interrupt.
Go
That's
ahead.
not just anybody from the press. We met her in DC in September.
I was going to say,
was outside.
You're getting ahead. You're getting ahead of my remarks.
Right.
But yeah, so Kristen Fisher, she's nice. She was at the hearings last year in 2025, which had George Knapp, Dylan Borland, Nusatelli. I'm blanking on the rest of the names, but that whole group that was in September. And he said in his response to Kristen's question about Obama's announcement about UFOs, he said, quote, "We're going to be in full compliance with that executive order," which I'm kind of interpreting it as, yes, it seems that there was some executive order that was signed. Now, have we seen like a press release or a statement by the White House outlining what that executive order is? No. But at least from Pete's comments, it seems that there was something written into the mandate of, we're doing this and here's potentially how we're going to do it. And then on Friday, this was before we attacked Iran, Arrow quote tweeted the Defense Department, and the Defense Department put out this like, this week at DOD, here's what we did. And in this announcement, they say that they are facilitating the expeditious release of never before seen UFO information. And of course, a lot of people in the UFO community were detesting and crying, saying, oh my gosh, Arrow's involved. Like, we're never going to get anything. Disclosure's dead. But I had a completely different way of interpreting this. And here's kind of how I interpreted it.
Unfortunately, we don't have any audio from your presentation.
Oh, goodness.
But
okay.
For the viewers, in case you're wondering, this skit is this like Kids in the Hall, if I'm not mistaken?
Whitest Kids You Know.
Whitest Kids You Know. That's right. All right. So it's the Whitest Kids You Know. And essentially, the press secretary is telling them all this crazy shit, like, oh, we have like, aliens on the moon and all this other stuff. Aliens are real, and we have bases.
It was
on
moon
the moon.
bears. Hold on.
Yeah.
So
moon bears, thank you.
the actual skit is that there's the secret moon base, and they had bears on the moon. The moon bears rise up, and then the White House press secretary is coming out and kind of announcing all this. And the whole skit is like the press kind of freaking out from all these like statements from the White House. And then towards the end in this clip, the press secretary, one of the reporters, he goes, just a quick question, just kind of shot in the dark here. We wouldn't happen to be invading Iran today, would we? And I mean, we did. I mean, look, the statement was made on February 28th. We attacked that night. So yeah. Anyways, other matters. Sorry, do we have anything we want to talk about with the timeline or anything, or do we want to?
No, because we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. So that's a great preamble for what's to come, because I'm sure we each want to talk about each point of that timeline pretty extensively coming up soon, because each one warrants like 15-20 minutes of discussion, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure. Well, if we want to pull back up the timeline in the slide deck, again, this is why I made the slide deck.
Yeah, sure.
So we can have that open for our conversation. Briefly though, I have other matters, some other things that came up, UFO relevant. So predating all of the Obama and Trump back and forth, and then of course the White House announcement, we started with some claims from a ufologist from the UK named Mark Christopher Lee, who was saying that there was some pre-planned speech written by President Trump, and it was going to happen on July 8th, which is the anniversary of Roswell. These claims were then later backed up by Laura Trump, who is the wife to, I want to say Don Jr. Don Jr. And she said that, yes, Trump does have a speech plan on the topic, and he's kind of waiting for whenever the time is right. So obviously, I'll believe it when I see it. I don't really know if there is ever going to be an admission, judging by the way things are going. Potentially, Eric. Okay, so she's married to Eric. I knew she was married to one of them. But yeah, so interesting comments about Trump's possible speech. We'll see it whenever the time is right. I don't know when the time is right. And honestly, that statement kind of sounds like when Pam Bondi was saying, oh yeah, I have the Epstein client list and it's sitting on my desk, only for her to walk that back. So I don't know. Other matters. Hillary Clinton was also asked about UFOs during her Epstein hearing. I don't know if you guys caught this, but apparently her hearing that she had in the House Oversight Committee was a circus. They kind of had to shut down the hearing initially because someone broke the rules and posted a picture of her attending the hearing when the rules were like nothing comes in or out. They did record the actual deposition, but it just hasn't been released publicly. I still think they have to go through like redact stuff. So we'll probably see the tape, but apparently she was asked questions, and I actually did see some reporting that she specifically asked about the NDAA and the UFO disclosure amendment language. That's just what I'm hearing from the streets. So in any case, I would love to see the tape. I think we'd all love to see the tape of her deposition and just kind of clarifying what those statements were and what the representatives were asking about. Because I think, as we all kind of know here, Hillary is very much connected with conversations around, past UFO disclosure pushes, key people within particularly the Democratic Party that were, interested in UFO disclosure. And there's kind of a history about that. Then last little bit, I've been kind of seeing reports about this. I don't know if you guys have seen this or put stock into this at all, but apparently there's some reporting about orbs being seen over Iran. Some interesting videos there. Obviously the Bledsoes have been reporting this as well, but thought it would be worth mentioning. So
make sure we put a pin in the Hillary stuff for later, because when we adhere to our timeline, this is, in my opinion, the crescendo of the timeline of current UFO events that I think we really need to spend some significant time talking about, because this Hillary deposition being asked about UFOs is either going to be critical or an absolute disaster. So I look forward to expanding on that in a bit.
I agree.
There's a lot of easy ways to flub that one too.
Yes, I agree. And she's not the only one yapping about UFOs. See, our boy Eric Burleson as well is commenting on Age of Disclosure, talking about recently on Thursday, saying how it changes the course of history. And I actually commented on his comment here. I'm like, what did you mean by that? Like, could you kindly elaborate? Because, this documentary's been out for a couple of months. There's been a lot of recent reporting and a lot of recent statements by the executive. It's like, is this leading somewhere, or are we just playing promotional for documentary. I don't know. It's still a great one. If you haven't watched Age of Disclosure, I'd go encourage you to go check it out. But what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Too far past the orb thing, I just
Okay.
want to mention, please, guys, please, you have to understand that there is a gigantic air campaign being waged against Iran. We're talking at any given time, there are 500 to 1,000 stealth fighters in the air, not to mention like lesser fourth generation fighters, tankers, AWACS, you know, cruise missiles that are currently in flight. There's going to be a lot of stuff that people see, especially involving, you know, when they're attacking things that have air defenses still left. There's going to be flares. There's going to be other stuff. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to look like orbs on really cruddy cameras at long distances that are using digital zoom, that are filmed from Middle Eastern countries and then uploaded through filtered internet. Just saying. Just want to throw that out there.
I can see that.
Not 500 fighters, maybe 200 max. I mean, I'm probably exaggerating a bit on the number of fighters there, Draco, but you know, it's a very large number of airframes that are currently in the air.
Yeah, stealth wise, I don't even know if like 500 stealth aircraft exist, period. But I don't know. This is Black Project
1,700 F-35s at least.
1,776 F-35s.
Yeah, cool. Something like that.
All right. So AOD's comments. I had some kind of possible discussion, points of discussion, but I think we kind of have a pretty good plan on what to do. Did you guys check out Ross Coulthart's interview with Chris Ramsey?
Yes.
Basement interview.
Yeah.
It's a good one. I have some things we could definitely talk about there. So yeah, obviously we'll be talking about Hidden Wing, of course. Gerb, sorry.
Kerm, do not exit out of your PowerPoint. What I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize it while we launch into some stuff, but we're going to be returning to this because there's also some great points to talk about here.
Okay. Well, here's a great point. Shout out Galactic Troubadour. I thought this was probably one of the best Grok AI prompts I've ever seen. If you're not prompting with this, you're never going to get disclosure. And yeah, shout out Galactic Troubadour.
Well, the difficult part about auditing all IRADs is back in I think 1992, there were new policies enacted to encourage greater IRAD within contractors before we had the Last Supper and consolidation of primes, where contractors could actually choose to what level they brief their government customer on their IRAD activities while still requesting money back from the government. For people who don't know, IRAD is Independent Research and Development, which is basically a self R&D system for a contractor to pursue R&D items of national security interest to the United States government and then bill the DoD for that. So what's difficult here is I can find the exact law or exact policy enacted in 92, but contractors don't need a comprehensive briefing to still request money back for IRAD, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I think we discussed this on one of our prior live streams. I'm starting to remember that.
Yeah, we have.
Anyways, that's the end of my slide deck, actually.
Okay. All right.
That was really it. I tried to make it short but sweet. I didn't want to ramble too much, but if you guys want to hop around to any of the slides or
keep this up. Because right now I want to launch into this topic, and I know Rob has quite a bit to say about this. In the public zeitgeist of the topic, the year 2027 has arisen once again, 2027 and 2034. According to the hubbub about this conversation, there is an imminent threat, spaceship invasion coming in 2027. And according to the cultural zeitgeist in the conversation, there has been an info operation to feed specific personalities or people or influencers or thought leaders this sort of information. For what that purpose is, we can discuss that. But before we launch into that, I need to say something that is very important for me to say. I have never been exposed to the 2027 conversation about an incoming alien threat. And I think that is because of the circles that I choose not to run in. And we can talk about that, but I have never had a serious conversation with somebody that has alleged or that I believe has engaged in legacy program operations or been intimately involved in the study of them that has mentioned this or a looming threat. So I am very skeptical on this, and I'm looking forward to talking about it and addressing Rob's points.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make the point that to complement your point, if anything, the people I've talked about have assured me that I know, like, to loosely quote, I know of no such threat.
Right.
Is a thing that I've been told.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know what to believe, but I will say that, one of the things I wanted to bring up, and we mentioned this earlier, is that of all people, Red Panda Koala on Twitter made a post recently that had some audio of Elizondo specifically mentioning that the 2027 incoming object rumor came from his time with the Space Force,
Right.
knowledge that he gathered there. Yeah, so it's and this is a story that's been passed around. I know that I've heard this through John Ramirez as well.
Right.
He was told through other contacts, which again, this could be from the same source. This could have come from Elizondo as well. I don't know. But now that that's publicly out there, a bunch of personalities have gone on record mentioning that, like, hey, yeah, I was fed this disinformation too by people who were either closely associated with or known to be proxies thereof of Lou Elizondo. So I don't know what the real purpose of it is for. In my opinion, I interpreted it as some sort of, like, I generally interpret threat framings as the same as, or sort of intending to drive some sort of institutional or policy-based response. To what end, I'm not sure, but
well,
I'll
definitely
let you guys
increasing the Space
hypothesize
Force
on that.
budget. I think it's budgetary.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong here too. Didn't Pavel from Seco Activo recently talk about Colonel Carl Nell also speaking about looming threats or so forth behind the scenes? I'm not recalling his video perfectly, but
I don't know.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I do think he spoke about that. To me, this almost seems like an information operation to accelerate the conversation of trying to basically accelerate the public and the zeitgeist speaking about the subject of UFOs, installing imminent, if you want to call it, a need to address the topic. And you mentioned Lou Elizondo. This isn't the first time he's done such a thing, including TTSA, to try to drum up the public zeitgeist and public interest into the topic. I clearly recall the Bass 10-month report from 2009, the Project Forum, which was outlined to basically create a media influence campaign from popular rock stars or musicians or celebrities out in California, and use them to influence the public on the UFO topic. This to me almost seems like a grassroots astroturfed effort to do a similar thing to accelerate the conversation about UFOs. Thinking about some of the people that were brought into these signal chats and told about an imminent alien invasion, a lot of them don't seem like hardcore researchers. They seem to be fringe in the topic, or maybe they work in another industry but have a public interest in the topic. And it's not necessarily the hardcore researchers that are.
I would say it's more media.
Yeah,
comedians.
Well, I mean, I don't want to say comedians, but like there are definitely like folks that were in those chats that were, like, say you and I weren't invited to that one. By chance, but like the folks that were generally have some sort of like large platform, whether that's media, whether that's social media, whether that's through whatever it is that they do. And I'm just going to say that that's what I noticed as a commonality thread there.
And I think it was RPK that also posted clips of Chris Ramsey kind of drilling Lou on questions about the 2027 conversation.
Yeah.
And Lou seemed rather evasive, saying, people are going to say that it's my words. That's what I'm talking about. But it is seeming like this was a operation from Elizondo. Now, I got to say, we're talking allegedly here. Some of Lou's cronies before have reached out to me and said that Lou will sue me for speaking negatively about him. So I just need to say we're playing characters here and speaking in allegations, because I don't need that sort of tomfoolery coming my way. And this was specifically,
this is all just allegations.
This was specifically in relation to talking about Lou exposing Tom DeLonge to elements of the Immaculate Constellation, USAP. And this was because in October of 2017, basically 1 month after Lou left federal service, Tom DeLonge went on the Joe Rogan Experience. And it's a rather infamous episode now, but Tom DeLonge, Tom was talking about one of his contacts, one of his advisors, who liaised with the NRO, had told him that NRO scientists had figured out episodic visits of UFOs, how to track where and when these things are arriving. The Immaculate Constellation document, specifically about a Tic Tac sighting, talks about the sensor collection platform having forewarning of the appearance of the object. So
Yep.
seeing as Lou Elizondo was liaison to the NRO for TTSA, one must think about that connection there. And I find it rather disappointing that there would be allegations of lawsuits for just merely discussing that idea. So hopefully
And
we don't face the same wrath.
Yeah, and like it sounds like it sounds relatively reasonable. I mean, like, and if you're not able to ask these questions, then it's like we can't even have a conversation. Like, what are we doing?
And there's also nothing illegal whatsoever about publicly hypothesizing about public information.
Yes.
So I'll quote Jeremy Corbell when George Knapp, and some others were speaking about their age of disclosure review. If Lou Elizondo had prior experience on the legacy programs, now would be a good time to come out and say it. The further these sorts of weird operations, if it connects to him or not, kind of carry on, there's going to be harder questions and harder truths to say. I think he had a recent tweet or he recently appeared on a podcast or an interview where he's talking about gatekeepers of the legacy programs and individuals working within the legacy programs actively running interference, saying there's a target on you. Basically, you come forward now or you're screwed. I would prompt that same statement at him. And it's unfortunate that this situation kind of arises, but that's what I would say.
That feels like a Spider-Man meme sort of thing to me.
The pointing meme.
Where it's like two Spider-Mans pointing at each other, and
oh man,
I don't know. It's the one thing I would say to the audience is that when it comes to who you want your media-facing person to be, if it's a counterintelligence officer, there's probably trust issues, and that's not their fault necessarily. That's what they do. That's their job, but there's still trust issues there.
There is more meat, actionable intelligence, and alpha in a 13-minute or 12-minute and 40-second interview with David Grush on Megyn Kelly than there has been in Lou Elizondo's entire book, in the entire Age of Disclosure documentary, and so forth. So at least for me, when I'm throwing my hat in the ring and saying who I'm going to listen to as a media individual, it will be the rare but precious appearances David Grush has.
Yeah, that man's basically a unicorn. But
I know.
True.
It's and maybe that we're jumping the gun a little bit, but that could also lead to discussion of Hillary Clinton. I mean, maybe we can do this and then start at the beginning of the timeline. If you remember that Megyn Kelly interview, I'm sure you guys have watched that, right? It's it's excellent. And I encourage anybody here to go look up Megyn Kelly, spelled with a Y, MEGYN Kelly, David Grush. Grush speaks about various operations to establish a certain political candidate as a global disclosure advocate.
Right.
For all intents and purposes, this was a campaign run by John Podesta, Luis Elizondo, some of the OSAP crew, elements of TTSA, maybe some weird Air Force interviews, such as Neil McCaslin and so forth, that there was an attempt to propose Hillary Clinton as the disclosure president. She would be the one to bring disclosure of probably not derivative technologies, reverse engineering, recovered non-human technical vehicles, but the same sort of disclosures we got through the ATIP program, which is there is non-human intelligent. They might be very scary and bad for us, but we don't know what they are, which I believe is demonstrably false. Yeah. So when Hillary Clinton is haphazardly asked about UFOs during the Clinton deposition, boy, I sure hope that House Oversight, Burleson, Luna, and whoever was there, maybe Burchett specifically, have had very robust interrogatories to ask Hillary Clinton. This may have been the only chance, or one of the only chances, to legally ask her about her involvement with the ATIP program, with the Obama administration, with the National Security Council, with James Clapper, to understand more of that information up. And if that was squandered, boy, am I disappointed.
Yeah, no, for real. However, I will say what I have also heard is that the context of UFOs getting brought up in this Epstein hearing was actually that Hillary asked about it. And apparently that she had asked about like the specific language in the NDAA around the UFO disclosure. I'm pretty sure that's the UFO disclosure amendment, the UAPDA. Yeah. And she was asking questions, presumably about like what happened to it, why hadn't it gone through. And I think I think that tracks as well. Not so much just because like, her potential connection to 2016. She's been kind of like, she's been interested in the UFO thing since well before 2016. There's an infamous picture that
of
I know
her with Rockefeller.
People, yes, with her and Lawrence Rockefeller, and she's holding a book by Paul Davies about, Are We Alone in the Universe and the Search for Extraterrestrial Life. She knows ball.
Are We Alone? The Philosophical Implications of the Discovery of Extraterrestrial Life by Paul Davies.
Yes. So she knows ball. And her asking that question, and again, I want to see the tape, and I'm sure Congress is probably going to post it soon if the Les Wexner and how that whole thing kind of played out, if that's any indication. But it seems to be that she was more inquisitive about like what happened there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Jello Mob in chat pointed out that John Mack was at that gathering too.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, Bill Clinton. Go ahead, Rob.
No. There's just like a lot of like really crazy people were at that gathering, but John Mack is a very notable one. So.
It was like John Mack, Stephen Greer, Bigelow,
Greer was too,
right?
Yeah.
Pretty much all the big names. Linda Moulton Howe was there.
Bill Clinton was interested in the topic. The question is, did he get somewhat of a briefing when he tasked people to investigate the legacy programs? And the secondary question is, did he believe them? But of course, this was something that Hillary seemed to have a much more stalwart position on, to be involved with this campaign that was established under the Obama administration to kind of appoint her the disclosure president. And this is why, and there's some, I'll talk about this a little more in an upcoming video I have, because some figures associated with this pertain to the topic that's really interesting. And there's a core connection between that whole crowd, that whole effort, the recent David Grush, Megyn Kelly interview that pertains to the specific subject I'm going to talk about. So that's going to be interesting. But that whole info op, if that was a squandered opportunity to ask Hillary Clinton questions on her involvement, that is near unforgivable, and that's very poor planning.
Yeah,
but who? I mean, again,
if a Lauren Boebert. You remember when Lauren Boebert asked the questions about like hybrid aliens and all that? Like she came into the U.S. Like if that was kind of the line of questioning from Congress, like when they were asking Hillary about UFOs, then I'm sorry, it's like they squandered it. But if they were being serious about it, and we've been talking about it, like there's real material here. Like if Congress wanted to ask good questions, there's stuff they can ask questions about. So
right, and even a question like Hillary Clinton. Did you engage with elements of the National Security Council within a prior presidential administration to establish yourself as the president or authoritative figure to release the existence of non-human intelligence visiting this planet? That alone is also a massive squandering, because you need a comprehensive set of interrogatories, a full 2-3 hour deposition itself to ask her these questions. And if there were just 2, 3, 4 off the cuff questions, that's disastrous. And I would not know the next steps to rectify that situation, but there've already been problems with interrogatories before.
Yeah, I mean, it's specifically with like interrogatories like this, it just so the viewers understand, in order to establish something like definitive like that in the congressional record, it requires a very like diverse set of questions that you have to ask in order to establish context,
exactly,
so that there's no nuance whatsoever to what is being stated.
Right, and these interrogatories, these interrogatories have to be framed that they could be used in a legal session later on down the line. That's the whole point of the robustness of these questions, like Rob was saying. So, that whole Hillary Clinton, Obama, and Bill Clinton saga, I think, is a story largely yet to be told, some of the nuances and intricacies of that. But I will be very upset if we just we ruin some chances there. So, but let's rewind, because the whole state of current events really started with Obama talking about aliens. Are they real? So let's start there. And I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on Obama's statement transitioning into Trump's Air Force One, and then we can get to the tweet and so forth.
I can start off. I'll say, like, there's been some question, just because Obama's statements are interesting. This isn't the only time that he's spoken about UFOs. I think famously he was on like Jimmy Fallon's late night show, and he was saying some things. He's also been on a couple other shows like hinting at aliens. This is, I think, the first time where he said something and then like there was a response. Like most of the times when he made these kinds of statements, it was like, oh, okay, Obama said this thing about aliens, and then people just kind of move on. But this was significant just because you had the Trump response. And the Trump response was specifically that, oh, he wasn't supposed to say that. He gave classified information. Now, for lack of a better term, it's hard to tell whether or not Trump was just talking shit and just trying to get one over Obama, because we know this man has beef with Obama going back more than a decade, or if he's being legit about Obama revealing stuff that he wasn't supposed to reveal. And then the substance of like, what is that classified information? So you look at Obama's statement and it's like, he basically says, yeah, the aliens are real. And yeah, I asked about it. You know, it was like one of the first things I asked when I showed up to office, but they're not being kept at Area 51. And I don't really know anything unless there is. And he had this like kind of weird line where he says, unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the president of the United States, which, as we know from whistleblowers, from senior officials that have spoken out on the record, from the UFO lore, if you will, yes, there is an enormous conspiracy, and they do hide it from presidents, and that certain presidents are told more than others. And Obama might have been one of these guys that maybe he was not briefed during his presidency. That's at least word on the street. So the question then becomes, okay, the classified information, is it the part of like, oh, it's not being kept at Area 51? Or is it the more, you know, the part of Obama's comment, which is more like fan service to the UFO, you know, ufology in general, which is this, you know, it is an enormous conspiracy and they did hide it from the president. So yeah, that's kind of how I view it. It's interesting. And then obviously, you know, the White House coming out that evening, like after Trump was asked about this on Air Force One, like this all happened very quickly. And yeah, it's interesting. We'll see more, I think.
Yeah. So from those statements, to think about how much Obama was briefed into the topic, either during his presidency or after, that to me is still a black hole, but enough to where he engaged in certain NSC operations to establish various limited disclosure campaigns. But the extent of to which he was briefed into the legacy programs or success of derivative technologies or the ability to down human crafted, that's a black hole for me. I have no idea there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only hints we really do have is, I mean, kind of back to Podesta, because he famously said, I want to say 2014, 2015, he said that his biggest regret was not getting the UFO file released. And that's kind of what started the whole, you know, personality with him of like being a UFO advocate, whatnot. That's when he had the emails between TTSA
and WikiLeaks.
Yeah. So that all came out in the WikiLeaks, but it, you know, it largely started with
that was while Podesta was working for the Obama administration.
Correct? Exactly. Yeah. So him saying that he couldn't get the UFO file released, it's like, okay, well, they like Obama didn't get the UFO file. Like that's kind of how I'm interpreting that comment.
From those WikiLeaks, one of my all-time favorite communications is with Bob. Or so you go ahead, Rob, and then I'll say
go
it.
Ahead.
Well, I just wanted to mention really quickly, like to the effect of like, oh, they didn't get access to it. I don't think that's the only conclusion we can draw there. I mean, you could draw from that statement, you could draw the opposite conclusion that they did get access to it and that they merely didn't get permission to release. Either didn't get permission to release or like, you know, the order was never given because they were told to keep cover. You know, the only thing that I would point to that leads me to that conclusion is, you know, Obama's employment of people like Brennan and other individuals.
Clapper,
Brennan, Clapper, other guys that seem to have gotten access to at least one subset of programs and sort of locked those down for themselves, rather than necessarily making them public. You know, and we know that Brennan worked with people like Sturdivant and others. So
I wouldn't be surprised if the near future reveals that James Clapper was the closest thing legacy programs have had to a central figure like a Dick Cheney since the late 2000s. I wouldn't be surprised if that starts to show up. Not that he was director of the entire NSC-led crash retrieval portfolio, but that he was the closest thing, even though I don't think there's one central figure behind the control group right now. But with those, go ahead, Kerm.
So then what do you make of his comments in AOD then? Because he says like he was aware of this program at Area 51. Like, was he just being like, was he just letting on perhaps the minimum of like, okay, the public will they'll take this bone, but then they won't ask other questions about my involvement.
Right.
Like, what do you make of those comments?
It's the same thing Lou Elizondo did. Did Lou Elizondo talk about his prior experience on the legacy programs, like Jeremy Corbellis hinted at? Did Lou Elizondo talk about the ATIP program not being real, besides just being written on a couple pieces of paper, but had no appropriations or no budget? And in that same line of thinking, it doesn't make sense why Eric Davis, Hal Puthoff, Gary Nolan, and others were listed as ATIP scientists, which is just demonstrably false. So that whole film is one giant bag of lies and partial limited disclosures. So Clapper being in 3 scenes that total less than 1 minute, where all he talks about is being involved in a program out at Area 51 in the NTTR to monitor UFOs is a real tragedy. I recall David Grosh on Megyn Kelly saying he shouldn't be the only leader or former senior officer within, armed forces or intelligence that's being completely transparent with the information they have been exposed to on the topic. I think the exact quote Dave Grush says there is, I ask in reference to Clapper for him to be a greater leader on this. So it's the same through line in most of Age of Disclosure. It's a tiny slice of the pie, but nothing else. And I think that film's going to age very poorly. I mean, recently Dan Farrow went on a documentary, or went on an interview, and I think he kind of clapped back at some conversation or some questions I've made, that the legacy program, monolithic legacy program outlined in the Age of Disclosure is just abhorrently false, constructed to misdirect, not because the people in the film are uninformed, but because these are the institutions and agencies that get to catch the live hand grenade. And why isn't the National Security Council at the top of that CIA DSNT, and why are primes, DOE, and Air Force on an equal playing field below? But what Ferris said is, he said that individuals who have been criticizing that legacy program outline, like myself, are incorrect. That, if there's a maritime retrieval, oh, don't worry, DSNT can get OGA contractors, other government agency, to basically provide contractors or JSOC units to fish a craft out of a sea. And that's not an answer to what I said. What I said is, where's the Office of Naval Intelligence that Stratton is clearly going to bat for? Where's other various contractors? Yeah, where's Neuro? Where's FFRDCs? And Ferris' response to this was that every single one of the 34 government officials told him these were the only 4 institutions that were involved. So it's clear that Ferris' knowledge doesn't go beyond what Elizondo and others told him, but it's very clear, just like 2027, that the Age of Disclosure is an information operation meant to provide partial disclosures, which is a shame. It's a shame.
Yeah. So unfortunately, he seems to have bit the whole onion that they've handed him without taking the opportunity to look around and realize that there's other real fruit.
And who was it? It was either Farah or Elizondo that basically said, oh, Clapper's wife was extremely sick in the hospital, and he turned down spending time with her to come do the interview. And we said, no, you can do it another time. He said, no, I'll still do it. That's a ploy to play and tug on heartstrings and so forth. The fact Clapper is in 3 scenes and talks about nothing is horrific. It is. It's awful. And don't get me all riled up. I've been on enough of a rant there. But yeah, that whole Obama. But okay, so let's keep going on Obama's statements, because he also said they're not kept under Area 51. Well, as we know, Area 51's underground installations are sort of a gray area, but we can be sure with 100% certainty that there is a massive underground infrastructure near Groom Lake, near that area of the Nevada test site in NTTR, that was dug out by EG&G Special Projects, Sandia National Lab, an old borax mine that predates Area 51's opening in the early 50s, and in my opinion, S4 by Papoose Lake, which is a very real facility. So it seems to me that that's like another play, like Arrow constantly saying extraterrestrials. It's a very choice wording there to just say underground facilities below Area 51. What do you guys think about that?
I will say briefly, because George Knapp, I'm pretty sure he put out like a special a couple weeks ago, but he was discussing that there was an archaeologist that actually snuck into the Area 51 site, and he was looking for Native American like hieroglyphs and whatnot. And the story goes, he's laying down on the floor of the desert, middle of the night, and a portal just opens up in the middle of Papoose Lake, and just crazy stuff. It looked like he said it was like almost like a door had opened up from the lake bed. And it's like, okay, either you can interpret that as like, maybe it's like a portal and something just opens up and it's some kind of crazy portal thing. I don't know. Or maybe it's something a little bit more fixed. Like, you hear a lot about these like hangars kind of inside of the mountain
Mhm,
with
mhm.
S4. Like maybe it's something where, you know, when they do the test, they just, you know, press a button, the hanger comes up, it pops out of the ground, and then, you know, they put it back down so that no one can kind of see it. I don't know. It's interesting. And it's super interesting to me just because we have that one data point of this archaeologist who was not looking for UFOs at all.
Right.
Like he was not looking for that whatsoever, but he saw some weird stuff over there. Like what's going on?
Correct me if I'm wrong. He was just interested in tracking the dispersion of 49ers, of prospectors during the gold rush.
Yes, that was it. He was looking for gold miners. Yeah, he was looking for like the movement of gold miners out west. Yes, correct.
And so, you know, there's extensive underground infrastructure below the Nevada Test and Training Range. So it seems to me like an exclusionary statement by Obama. And remember, Obama was the one to officially reveal the actual existence of Area 51. Do you guys remember what year that was? Was that 2011, 2012?
Like when the government
I believe
officially...
it was 2014 when it was
2014.
officially acknowledged.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I could be wrong on that.
That sounds right. It was like early mid 2010s. And at that point, like we had the story of Lazar. He had spoken about Area 51 and S4. That story came out late 80s, early 90s. So at that point, like the public had, I mean, I had known about Area 51 when I was like 8 or 9 years old watching the History Channel. Like it was known. And then all of a sudden the government's like, oh yeah, you know, it's actually a real place. It's kind of the same thing they did with the Navy videos too. I mean, they said that those things were real years after they were leaked to the New York Times, and they decide to announce it at the heat of the COVID crisis. So yeah, many such cases.
Here's something cool that Luigi does in Project Gravatar, and then we'll keep going. He actually looks through actual topology maps and Google Maps and so forth to find shrubbery where the alleged hangar doors of S4 shrubbery being moved and placed differently, and also uses various aerial photographs to play with the contrast to try to outline the hangar doors. It's really interesting.
Dude.
That was my favorite part
really
of the whole documentary. So Trump goes on Air Force One. Obama revealed classified information. That just seems like a total Trump type statement. But later in the afternoon, I think what we want to talk about is the Trump tweet about the UFO files. Kerm, may I please bring up your presentation? Will you go to the timeline slide and
brother, I'm already on the timeline slide. I'm already on there.
Can you read us Trump's tweet, please?
Can I read it in Trump's voice?
Go right ahead.
Based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified anomalous phenomenon, also known as UAPs, and unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and any and all information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America. Thank you.
It seems, I
wish you would have given us a thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you for your attention to this matter.
So
I will not be releasing the Epstein files.
Let's start here because I think Rob has a really poignant conversational take and things we should address on statutory versus regulatory authority and how that can come into play with declassifying certain files, because I think we're all probably in agreement. Let's go ahead and separate the UFO files from the legacy program files. These two can be disclosed, not mutually exclusive, right? You could disclose the presence of NHI of the UFO files without disclosing legacy stuff. So Rob, why is the disclosure of the alien files not as simple as just the Secretary of War saying, let's get these files, working with Arrow and getting them in the bag? Why is that more complicated than meets the eye?
Oh my God, there's so many reasons. And I'm like, the worst part is I know enough about this that it pisses me off. And so I want to tell everybody about it, but not enough about it to, from like a legal standpoint, accurately explain all of the different issues that companies could raise in terms of like antitrust violations and things like that. So let me try and start with at least just the pure legal standpoint that we have for what can be done within an executive order. Declassification. The original classification authority for a lot of these things is not going to be executive power. The original classification authority, as David Grush told us 2 years ago, is for the most part for materials and some of these programs is under the Atomic Energy Act of 1953, if I'm not mistaken. 54.
54.
Okay. Atomic Energy Act of 1954, specifically indicating that, materials that have radioactive properties can be classified under this act as being born secret. The term born secret is not just a made up term. It's an actual legal term that was used in this law to indicate that by its very nature, these objects and the science around them is secret by law. So you would have to, the president cannot just unilaterally repeal a law. He would need to utilize it. And this is still very possible, right? If he wanted to do so, the president could very easily whip the votes in Congress in order for them to pass a piece of legislation that would enable them to repeal that classification process through the Atomic Energy Act. However, without having done so, I do not personally see a reasonable way in which you can rectify those two different things. Now, by the other end of the spectrum here, this administration has shown a great willingness to stretch the limits of what executive orders are allowed to do. And a willingness to say, well, we'll just do it until it ends up in the Supreme Court. So you could get that. Do I think you'll get that? No. I think there are way too many competing interests, especially corporate interests that have a lot of money riding on this, that don't want to see this stuff just blabbed out to the public and have, potential edges that they have in their fields, sold out to people. And a lot of those same entities were the ones that paved Trump's way to the White House via donations and super PACs. So I can see a lot of influence being wielded there. Not to get too political with it, but I think that money will end up running things here. But that's just me.
You're not.
Yeah,
wrong.
to even go ahead, Kerm.
No, I was just agreeing with him.
I was going to say to even take that further, I'm of the mind that various PEDs, or basically classified presidential executive orders, presidential emergency action doctrines, were established under the Truman administration in the late 1940s that essentially gave custody of recovered non-human vehicles to the Atomic Energy Commission and their national labs. And I think even before the 1954 Atomic Energy Act, there was already a concerted effort to give the Atomic Energy Commission and its feelers, its tendrils, custody over these materials and craft. And the 54 Atomic Energy Agreement, restricted data, transclassified foreign nuclear information, special nuclear materials, and foreign intelligence information was just continue to kind of lock down the clamp on both legitimate nuclear secrets and being able to stretch, mold, and massage those concepts to protect UFO materials and the topic. I think back to what Dylan Borland said on his Weaponized podcast. He was talking about DTRA, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, in his time there. He specifically mentioned a trove of files that concluded that some UFOs or specific UFO sightings or recoveries or so forth were of extraterrestrial or non-human origin. And he specifically said that these were old Atomic Energy Commission files that were housed within DTRA that possess these inclusions. So a simple executive order, like you're saying, Rob, these files here under DTRA, protected by the Atomic Energy Commission, likely restricted data, is not going to be so simple as to just, fire out an executive order and declassify.
Yeah.
And so looking at this tweet, what do you guys think Trump's scope of understanding or wish for declassification, if he actually does have wish for declassification? Because I'm of the mind that Donald Trump and certain elements of the administration are well informed on this topic, and not just the reality of non-human intelligence, but also the subject of the legacy programs, not in official briefings from legacy members or institutional briefings, but from others. So what do you guys think the scope here of Trump saying this is? What is included in the declassification of the alien files?
I get so frustrated whenever I think about this, because I think that it's somewhat limited in scope. You've already got Isaacman at NASA, saying that NASA's got nothing. You've got Hegseth and Arrow saying that they're working together and all this other stuff. I really, really question exactly what's going to come out. Yeah, I'm trying not to be too negative here. I apologize to the chat, but I really don't foresee very much other than maybe divulging some old crash recoveries and some old material that like they no longer have. I could see that being a thing, but even that sort of opens the door for a lot of other things to be revealed later, but who knows? Sorry, not trying to be too negative here, but this whole presidential announcement just feels like another another distraction from
Like a
lot of
performative
other current
act.
events. Yeah.
Performative. That's a good word. Yeah.
He knows his base likes it. He knows his numbers are suffering. So let's get it out there. Let's get people happy. Let's give them a bone.
Yeah. I mean, UFOs are always the distraction from the Epstein files, right? So, I mean, also, I mean, just in that case too, I mean, look, it's kind of the same case. Like you have to kind of presume that the administration knows more than what is being let on publicly. We've heard that Trump has had briefings on UAP both during his first term and then also during his current term. So, you know, the way that he's structured or that he announced it, it seems kind of unserious just because, like, you know, you're just saying the Secretary of War and then like other relevant departments and agencies without getting into like specificity. And I think as we've kind of discovered from our research, like there are specific departments and agencies and groups that this information is housed at. And if you are not directing any sort of mandate at those specific groups, then those groups can try 7 ways to Sunday to not comply with that and be like, oh, well, you know, we know better than the administration. You guys are temporary employees anyway. So, you know, back to bullshit and games. So yeah, and also like I've seen some comments in the chat as well of like, to Pete Hegseth's comments, like, yeah, he's saying we're going to be in full compliance with an executive order, but we haven't seen the executive order. I get that.
Right.
I mean, typically the administration, they put out press releases whenever, you know, Big Don signs anything, and we haven't seen anything come through on that. I will just say, I think maybe we aren't seeing anything on that front for the same reason why we didn't hear anything about this announcement during the State of the Union, because I don't know if anyone watched the State of the Union. I subjected myself to it. It was the longest State of the Union ever, which was crazy. And some people were thinking like, oh yeah, he's gonna, you know, say something about this announcement. But the problem is, like, same time, the Democrats on the other side of the house, because this is unfortunately now a political issue, the Democrats showed up to the State of the Union with little lapels that said release the files. So if you're like a communications person, and I know Jeremy Corbell specifically talked about this when he interviewed Chris Sharp recently after Chris Sharp's interview with Tim Phillips. And there was like a weaponized show about that. But Corbell basically talks about how there is some conversation going on with the communications people at the White House where there's 2 different versions of the speech. And one of those versions mentions UFOs, the other one, not so much. And I think the communications people rightfully understood that it would have been ironic for him to get up there and say, oh, we're releasing UFO information and I'm the most transparent president of all time. Meanwhile, the administration's covering for Epstein, and there's like bipartisan, you know, there's bipartisan work now where they're trying to mandate the administration to play ball. So, you know, and UFOs is just one of these other kind of questions or one of these things that's going on with everything else. But you know, if anything, it's like I can understand why it wasn't talked about during the State of the Union and maybe why we haven't seen an executive order, but that's not to say it doesn't exist. But I mean, who's to know for certain? I don't work in the White House. I'm just talking on a YouTube live stream. So those are my comments.
Well, what I'm worried now is that it's been recently announced that Arrow will be working with the DoD to declassify both videos and certain files. In that sense, I'm worried what we're looking at is another Project Blue Book, or more worrying, in my opinion, another Robertson panel.
Possibly, but I will say, and this is according to Chris Sharp's comments in his kind of after interview, because he interviewed Tim Phillips, as I said previously.
Right.
It seems that Arrow might have some UFO reports and some UFO cases that they're looking at that are pretty interesting. So the stuff that we've seen so far is like, you know, Arrow's attributed it to being a balloon or a drone, like things that they've been able to figure out, like, is it UFO? But maybe the vein of this executive order is to kind of get Arrow to release the stuff that they aren't super sure about. And maybe like they're still trying to investigate it or whatever, but maybe the administration's like, well, the public needs to see this in the interest of transparency, and whether or not you end up concluding this isn't a UFO, like the public still needs to see it, right? Like that's one possible route. But at least, you know, per Chris's comments and just kind of what I infer from that, it seems that Arrow does have some stuff, and those, you know, it seems like some interesting cases, and I'd like to see them as much as the next person. And yeah, I mean, who knows?
Well, this would then, we would have to have a conversation about the integrity of Arrow's current director, Dr. Kislowski, wouldn't we? Because the founder of Arrow, Sean Kirkpatrick, was clearly a stooge that was either had prior exposure to legacy programs or was retroactively briefed around the time of the Arrow historical report so he could protect institutional legacy secrets. Let's not forget that
I would Kirkpatrick say more likely the former rather than the latter on that one. But
let's not forget that Sean Kirkpatrick and Arrow were basically stood up from USDI Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence Ronald Moultrie, and immediately upon Arrow's founding, Moultrie and Kirkpatrick would gallivant around debunking the subject of UFOs. And let's also not forget that Arrow was a bastardized version of what was supposed to be called the UAP JPO, Joint Program Office, from 2022 legislation, I believe it was. So Sean Kirkpatrick compromised.
Mentioning within that is that Moultrie also, when they stood the office up, specifically went out and secured multiple contracts with Sandcorp for information and perception management.
Oh, yep.
Tim Phillips has tried to say that what Sandcorp did was connected Arrow with subject matter experts from universities, but I'm highly skeptical of that. There is no concrete evidence for that.
Why would it have been under IPMO then?
Yeah, and we can tell from Sandcorp's own website and their own business dealings that they specialize in plugging whistleblower leaks.
I'm sorry, Rob, for those in the chat, could you briefly elaborate on IPMO and its significance?
IPMO is a term that has been changed from whatever the previous term was, which was psychological operations, if I'm not mistaken. Information and perception management is a thing that is technically not allowed to be done on the American public, on American citizens. However, due to some loopholes, you can perform information and perception management on information that's intended for distribution overseas. And the fact that American citizens are exposed to that information through their same media channels is inconsequential. There's other methods of doing it too. I'm not the legal expert on that, but you know, one of the things that I do want to mention to the reader or to the viewers before we go too far is that one of the core problems with Arrow, like being involved, is that structurally, and Gerb alluded to this, is that structurally Arrow was created by Congress to be like sort of the official place where military personnel, intelligence community members, and cleared defense contractors go to report these UAP encounters and any sort of knowledge of like legacy programs that might exist. But the problem is that it was placed structurally inside the same chain of command that controls the classification decisions for the Department of Defense. And they also have a sub compartment within that they're required to move testimony into and classify it the moment that they receive it, if any one of their monitor personnel decides that this needs to be classified. So the office that collects those reports answers to the security apparatus that decides what stays secret. And then there's no independent authority there that gets to look at it and release what it receives, you know, that is supposed to be received. You know, so Arrow can't look at this and say, oh, well, we think that's supposed to be released, so we're going to release it. No, the DOD has full authority over what they get to even say it was received, right? Like, for example, I could go and I could make a memorandum for the record, an MFR, and make a big statement to Arrow about all these legacy programs that I was involved with. I could provide evidence. I could provide all these other things, and that would immediately get classified the moment that I talked about a SAP or CAP.
Yep.
Essentially, we investigated ourselves and found we did nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong. Yeah, exactly.
And with Sean Kirkpatrick, let's not forget when he leaves Arrow, when he tucks tail and runs, he immediately takes a position with Oak Ridge, which is infamous in the subject. And Oak Ridge completely takes down his web appointee page. And then as of the start of 2025, Kirkpatrick's LLC, Nonlinear Solutions, is subcontracting under MITRE for U.S. Space Command and so forth. And then deputy director of Arrow, once Sean Kirkpatrick tucks tail and leaves, Tim Phillips is, for all intents and purposes, a diva. And I don't think Tim Phillips is as smart as Kirkpatrick to use tradecraft and favors to get in the sort of Oak Ridge position that Kirkpatrick was awarded. I think Tim Phillips, I don't think he's very smart. The greatest examples of this are Tim Phillips talking about what could be considered the Majestic 12 Special Operations Manual and talking to different podcasters on versus off air, giving different accounts of the Psalm 101, talking about an alien ET recovery manual with tons of pictures and illustrations and pictures of craft and so forth. And then on air saying a completely different story. Just as he's unintelligent to talk to Chris Sharp and discuss the existence of NURO, the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office.
That was
NURO
huge.
is the most highly classified intelligence agency we have, to the point where various naval flag officers I've spoken to have either denied being read into NURO because they don't have a need to know to be read in, or they're trying to provide a cover for the program and just can't admit to me that they've been read in. And Tim Phillips also is Tim Phillips is also infamous for going on LinkedIn and lashing out against the whistleblower, specifically David Grush. You know, even last week, both Kirkpatrick through his Stephen Greenstreet mouthpiece and Tim Phillips took to social media platforms to basically criticize any sort of declassification of UFO files, say that there's nothing there and so forth. So now hopefully the integrity of John Kozlowski is a little better. He seems like a pushover, so I don't know how much of a spine he's going to have to be effective here.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that, you know, the NURO admission is notable for everybody who's watching, so that you're aware. The first NURO was supposedly created in the 1970s. Okay,
1969.
This office,
Yep.
Right, 1969. This office went completely unknown to the public until a book that was released in 1998. Specifically, that book was Blind Man's Bluff, The Untold Story of the American Submarine Espionage Program by Sherry Sontag and Christopher Drew. I'm actually attempting to reach out to them to find out how they got that information and see if they're like willing to discuss that. Because somehow they were also able to tie Inman to it at the time.
Well, Inman has self-admitted he was director.
Right, exactly. So, but that was much later that he admitted that. So they were the first ones to be able to put that together. So
there are SSCI memorandums from specifically the 1970s that talk about both NURO and the National Reconnaissance Program together.
Oh, wow.
But those, those could have been the NRO was declassified in the early 90s. So those memorandums under SSCI were probably declassified in the mid to late 90s or early 2000s. So still, Blind Man's Bluff could have had the first mention. Also, gosh, I'm forgetting the book name right now, but The U.S. Intelligence Community by Jeffrey T. Richardson, I believe it is also a great discussion of NURO. So it was weird for Tim Phillips to mention that, but like Rob says, NURO has gone unacknowledged for a long time until I think it was 2018, the self-admission by Bobby Ray Inman. Hey, how about Bobby Ray Inman being found on the Bohemian Grove members list from
that was crazy.
Not shocking. Not shocking. That man's everywhere. He's on the board of every crazy company, you know, SAIC, you name it.
Definitely him being connected to SAIC, he's definitely like a tech bro kind of aligned person.
So I think if we do get some declassified files or videos that are actually worthy of declassification and not just Blue Book 2.0 or Robertson panel, then there is still an elephant in the room, which is the legacy programs. So do you guys think that the legacy programs, recovery, exploitation, and derivation of non-human vehicles should be lumped in with the same sort of disclosures as the UFO files or different? My opinion here is the subject of declassifying officially legacy operations needs to be handled very carefully, and such a disclosure or revelation to the public should only be done once oversight of the programs is shifted back to traditional oversight channels. So there can be no wild card plays or massive breakaway attempts or so forth by the legacy institutions. Before any sort of public revelations, there needs to be a shifting of power and structure and oversight of the programs. That's just my 2 cents. So I think the disclosure of UFOs and non-human intelligence should be done immediately, but I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in the revelation of the legacy programs. I think that it's a huge quandary, a difficult problem to solve, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, off the cuff, I do agree with you on like oversight and kind of reining in this program. That comes first. And then second, it's like releasing and telling the story, releasing the information. I mean, I think there's been sorry, go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I was just going to say, I'm going to take the exact opposite stance of both of you guys. I'm going to say that it's my opinion that the United States of America as a nation is in such a supremely gifted position militarily and economically, as tenuous as that may feel at times, it's still very much real. That you could reveal every single secret that the United States has and we would still be number one. I think you just,
I would love to be as optimistic as you, but
I mean,
I
from a military capability standpoint, you could basically lay it all bare except for the intelligence gathering tools.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Like, we'd still be fine. Oh, you know how we're going to get you? Great. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, I guess just the general kind of concern is that if you just kind of open the kimono, then adversaries kind of know what we have and they can quickly catch up. But I mean, as long as like you kind of protect
that fear, right? But the implication has always been for a while that, you know, there are derivative technologies being developed by other nations, specifically China and potentially Russia as well. You know, so if that's the case, like, why don't you rip that Band-Aid off now, aside from, you know, proliferation concerns, which are still there? You've got AI that's going to be out there capable of teaching people how to make, you know, lesser weapons of mass destruction as it stands. So,
right.
Well,
but go ahead, Kermit.
No,
okay, I was going to say, but what does the caged or cornered rat do, or what is the death rattle of the legacy programs when the hour is near midnight and they understand their program operations are going to be exposed? We may have a very strong military structure, but what about the certain members of the air staff that serve very senior roles? What about certain joint chiefs of staff that have allegiances to legacy program operations? What about certain CIA deputy directors and so forth, whose allegiances are not going to be to the United States or the American people, but the programs that they have spent much of their life in, or may have compromise on them, or they may be unwilling participants in? What are the legacy programs going to do? You need enough of them to be able. Well, yeah, it's the same idea of Greer's old Storm the Dumbs, right? Which is, to me, a terrible idea because you're sending good Americans into a kill box.
Yeah. Well, the Storm Area 51 thing was a meme, and let's just leave it at that.
Well, I'm sure you guys saw it. Greer was talking publicly about ideas to send strike teams, special mission units into Dumbs, hoping that the personnel and the guards there would lay down their arms in harmony, not to attack American servicemen. But from what I understand, many of these installations have one entry, one exit, but are connected to other installations in a larger, you know, self-contained network, or a larger installation of sites and so forth. So you may be out in White Sands Missile Range, and there might be a janitorial or potable water shack out in the middle of nowhere that is an elevator down to a SAP-F that may house a recovered craft and may have a train system that goes somewhere else. But you're likely going to have to put a team, the SMU, in that elevator to gain access to the facility. And you are just putting people in a kill box. So that, to me, that idea has always stood out as just awful. But, you know, I don't know. I think
if you wanted to raid the Dumbs, you'd need the mole machine from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Rocksteady and Bebop popping out the side.
Yeah, or the one from the core, that secret vehicle they had from the core.
Or just grab a few nuclear subterranes and just drill right into these facilities, and then send in a team after that. But I don't know. Do you guys have an optimistic or a pessimistic stance overall? We'll say the starting of this is Trump's tweet about declassifying the UFO files. Do you guys have an overall optimistic or pessimistic?
As pessimistic
You.
as I've been throughout the course of our discussion, I will say that it moves the conversation forward,
Right.
not in a positive way. It's got more people talking about it. And honestly, if it has more people doubting what they actually produce, that's a good thing.
Yeah. I for one, I don't really know where this leads, but I think generally I would hope that we get an understanding of like the history, because like a lot of the UFO conversation is like what happened, quote unquote, allegedly back in the day. And if there is, never before seen UFO information, I hope it reconciles what has been. And I think some people, I think Borland specifically is just that name comes to mind. They've talked, like some of these folks have talked about, there's a concern within DoD that if you release historical information or the UFO files, then it leads to questions about the legacy program and the legacy program files. And then it would lead to this slippery slope where, we open the full kimono and we reveal current capabilities. I disagree. I think that there is a way of doing this where you declassify historical stuff, things that can be declassified, things that don't show or expose current capabilities. And it's like, it's similar to every other, secret intelligence and weapons program that we've had previously, like the SR-71, U-2, et cetera. Like the public can know about kind of older stuff to kind of fill in the gaps and be like, hey, by the way, this is what happened. And if we want to keep a competitive edge or hide current capabilities, that's fine. But that doesn't mean you can't be hiding the TR-3B. Because I've heard this thing is an antique vehicle. Like they're not, they got something better potentially than the TR-3B, or especially the flux liner. So, what do you mean we can't have disclosure because, we're going to reveal weapons platforms? Like some of this stuff is apparently sitting in garages, so
What's funny to me is there already seems to be interference on this specific topic. I mean, let's just say in a limited disclosure, not of full spectrum legacy programs, but UFO files, somehow we get some Atomic Energy Commission files pried through, and the revelation of a non-human intelligence on this planet. Heck, even Roswell's passed into there. It seems like some people connected with the OSAP program, the ATIP program, specifically Eric Davis, have already put sort of the institutional lines in to say, yeah, maybe there was once a program that was focused on reverse engineering and crash recovery. They didn't have any sort of success. And don't worry, in 1989, it was all shut down.
They shut down.
Yeah.
So I could see that sort of disclosure line being pushed by certain people to say, yeah, Roswell was a real recovery. We didn't know what the heck was going on. Yeah, maybe Kingman was too. There was a Manhattan Project 2.0 to try and figure out how these vehicles worked, but we couldn't do anything and it was shut down in 89. So I am concerned about various individuals already seemingly putting those guardrails of disclosures in.
Yeah.
Guys, I'll be right back. I'm going to run to the restroom real fast, and whatever you guys are talking about right when I get back, we will launch into. So I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Okay. Oh, this is dangerous. He just gave us the entire chat.
Yeah. Now we're in charge, guys.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention, somebody made a Joe Rogan joke in the chat. I wanted to make this joke earlier because I know you and I have talked about it a lot, Kermit. We know that. So, chat, you guys know what's going to happen when Gerb goes on Rogan, right? You're gonna get a 4-hour podcast, and it's going to be 45 minutes of UFOs and 3 hours and 15 minutes of MMA.
Oh man, and it would be even worse if he, dude. Imagine like it's not just Gerb. Like he goes on with say George St. Pierre, GSP. Like that would be even worse because he would just be he'd be glazing Rogan, he'd be glazing GSP. Like they'd have to be like, hey Gerb, like so like what? You have a YouTube, right? You follow UFOs? And he's like, yeah, no, but like I really like the Muay Thai thing, and I train, he would just be talking about UFC stuff.
Dude, a surprisingly large number of people that like we know in our little UFO circle have trained Muay Thai and also trained Muay Thai in Thailand. Like one of the dudes that I've worked with the book that I'm editing right now, Lies Above, he went and trained in Thailand with another gym that I wasn't as familiar with a former UFC fighter for a couple weeks. And I also went to Master Tati's in Bangkok and did like a week there when I was in Thailand. Muay Thai is awesome. It's pretty crazy to get your butt kicked by a very small Asian man for 6 days in a row.
See, I just shadow box in my living room like a weird person, but I need to get into more, physical. I need training, never know what I'm going to get into in these streets anymore.
So you guys were talking about striking?
Yeah.
No, we were just joking that like when you do finally go on Joe Rogan, it's going to be, a 4-hour podcast with 45 minutes of aliens and 3 hours of 15 minutes worth of MMA.
That's what Jeremy Corbell and I talked about, because he's got he of course is well versed in jiu-jitsu. We were talking about if we ever did a podcast together solely talking about jiu-jitsu for 4 hours, but the dream is to actually train with George St. Pierre. Now let me bring this up, because I do want to talk about this, and then we can go into a pretty robust Q&A section, because I know that's also fun with us. Real fast, what did you guys think about the Hidden Wing project in the Air Force, and what questions might you guys have? Because to me, that is, and I will stand by it, my favorite project I've ever done, and the one I have the most confidence in of anything I've ever done. So if you guys have questions or interesting comments, let's hear it.
I mean, personally, I love it. I'm still deeply in the midst of like actually attempting to map out all the entire like structure that you describe in the video. I'm building like Obsidian graphs for all of that, like as we speak. Actually, I don't want to share my screen or anything, but it's pretty nuts what I'm putting together at the moment. But man, it's one of the best. How do I describe it? If you guys haven't watched it, anybody who's watching the stream right now, obviously
they've probably seen it. Yeah.
Stop what you're doing. Pause the stream. Go watch Hidden Wing. Come back.
No,
these are recorded.
Actually, no. We need our viewers. Stop.
Okay.
But no, I mean, the entire concept is the thesis there, for those of you that haven't seen, is that, there's a massive ongoing test and evaluation program for derivative vehicles, alien reproduction vehicles, and recovered non-human craft, which exists across, basically the Western Air Force ranges for the most part of the United States. The Edwards 412 Tech Swing, the Nevada Test and Training Range, Utah Test and Training Range, and pilots that are drawn from Edwards Test Pilot School and the Navy Test Pilot School at Pax River. It's seen by the Air Force, what is it, Technical Operations Office? If I'm not mistaken.
No, it's overseen by AFTE, Test and Evaluation, but AFTE
Test
is
and
the
Evaluation,
operational
sorry.
aspect.
Yeah, and they're supported by AFTC, AFMC, and Air Force Research Lab. That's Material Command, Research Lab, and what is Training Command? Yeah, and they're funded through the Secretariat of the Air Force and the Acquisitions Command and the Rapid Capabilities Office. Just the breakdown on Rapid Capabilities Office alone was like, man, this is how this flows. Like, I've looked into the Secretariat of the Air Force a number of times. I think we've even talked about it like 6-8 months ago, something like that. While we were looking into certain individuals, we had brought up like Russ Weiler at the time, because we were looking into
shout out Alex Katz.
Yes, shout out Alex.
And we were looking into gatekeepers and all of this stuff. Like, when you started going into it in the video, I was like, man, this is right along the lines of what we had a feeling was handling this. So it's a pretty great breakdown of like how it actually works. Like, who sends the money? Like, where does the money come from? 30 to 40% of the money is slashed out of the budget before, the Secretariat of the Air Force even gets to distribute it for their special access programs. Yeah. There's a lot.
And before any SAF FM financial management oversight of the funds.
That's a big one. That's the big one. I mean, especially because, my niche interest with this whole topic, like when you kind of break down like how the money flows within, like things were clicking in my head of like, oh, okay. Because it plays on a lot of the themes that like we've kind of heard before of like, contract over allocation, and also just financial schemes in a way that like they can get the money moved before it becomes subject of oversight, before it gets reviewed by, these oversight committees, whatnot, at various levels. So I thought it was really, really good. The Rapid Capabilities Office stuff, that was stuff I was hearing, I think, for the first time. And not going to lie, Googled around on that. It's very interesting.
The 30 to 40% number, that was from Witness Ed, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Who had direct work in AQ, SAF AQ, which is acquisition.
Yeah.
And that office has a pretty significant budget. Like, this isn't chump change. Like, this is one of our main money purses that we use for like real shit we need for the Air Force.
That's why I would suggest looking at Lieutenant General Donna Shipton, who's now with Air Force Life Cycle Management Center, who during her time at SAF AQ was essentially responsible for Air Force SAPs that had, budgetary allowances of over 40 billion, 50 billion. I can't quite remember, but these
No,
individuals handling
the number that they gave was 60 plus billion
60 plus billion.
for those programs, and of
Yeah.
that 60 plus billion, 30 to 40% of it is siphoned off prior to it actually showing up within the coffers of Air Force acquisition. So
Yes. So the whole point of this project was, I have been subject to this too, but I had an incomplete overview of legacy programs at one point, what I consider an incomplete overview. And that would both consider the subject of FFRDCs, federally funded research and development centers, that I didn't include. And I had to, over a long period of time, understand that these aren't just rogue programs hidden within contractors like how Putoff would mislead you to believe, but that the US government isn't that smart to create new infrastructure and new offices. So to facilitate and operate these programs, they exist through official channels, just dual-hatted roles and stripped but strict oversight chains. So this is why I also put in stuff like the SAF AA, the administrative assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force, which was SAF AAH, or Sensitive Activities Russell Weiler, that Alex Katz talked about. In my understanding, SAF AA is actually a cover office, specifically the director, SAF AA, for legacy programs. And this was established in the early 80s. So some programs will be rolled under this. And then elements of the SAF AQ, SAF acquisition, SAF Air Force acquisition, specifically AQL, AQX, and AQR, are critical figures in the administrative aspects of the legacy program, specifically AQL, sensitive or special projects, in conjunction with AFTE, Air Force Test and Evaluation, and the RCO, the Rapid Capabilities Office, which works with numerous programs, acknowledged programs, including the B-21 Raider and X-37 orbital vehicle, is able to package Air Force acquisition, SAF AQ's involvement in legacy programs, and get necessary funding while bypassing the bureaucratic red tape of long acquisition timelines. So SAF AQ, RCO, Rapid Capabilities Office, is exactly what its name says. And then under Air Force Test and Evaluation, specifically starting with John T. Manclark, there's a great name for you to write down that I didn't include in the video. The Hidden Wing was born out of the Western Ranges. Now, some stuff I don't remember if I talked about in the video, but there will literally be derivative airframes or recovered vehicles driven up from Air Force Plant 42 to Edwards Air Force Base into a sealed electromagnetic test chamber and hangar for these vehicles to undergo various testings. Of course, if you know about Plant 42, it's a GOCO institution, essentially an FFRDC, government-owned, contractor-operated. It's an Air Force institution that its ownership can be traced back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, but there are 3 prime contractors that are allowed access to facilities, principal engineers, and infrastructure at Plant 42.
Can I interject really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just for the viewers that are watching right now, the key thing to know about government-owned, contractor-operated facilities is that when the contractor is asked, do you possess X, Y, or Z material, they can legally say no, because they don't possess it, they just operate it.
Yes, and this is why I have FFRDC as the critical layer above the prime contractors and various subcontractors in the legacy program pyramid. It's the perfect sort of, what is the term I'm looking for? Plausible deniability for both the contractor and the government sponsor for the FFRDC. And FFRDCs, you can think of the MITRE Corporation, RAND Corporation, QnA, Sandia National Labs, Los Alamos, etc. But Plant 42, it's a GOCO institution, which is intriguing. But the 3 contractors, the only 3 that are allowed to work at Plant 42 are Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman. So what I found, something that I still scratch my brain with about the Hidden Wing and testimony there, and what others have claimed, is that every now and then there is a recovered non-human vehicle that somehow test pilots, whether the vehicle is manned or unmanned, or principal engineers or test directors on site, can interface with and actually fly in a limited capacity. What that interface is, I have no idea. How that can be accomplished, I don't know, but that is so intriguing to me. Some of the people I talked about that have been in the test chambers where all three types of vehicles, alien reproduction vehicles, derivative airframes, and non-human vehicles, are situated in to undergo test and evaluation. The individuals that are in this room are not allowed to look inside of the craft. So you might have a test director out at Edwards, and there's a recovered disc there of non-human origin. He might be directing the principal engineers to do certain tests, whether it's radar cross-section, whether it's just, various egghead testing. But this test director, who's in charge of the operation, will still not be allowed to look inside of the craft. And I found that very intriguing.
Different compartment.
Mm-hmm. Very intriguing. And like from what I understand, that the Hidden Wing specifically, it's a pretty equal mix of manned and unmanned vehicles. And of course, there's three types of vehicles. And that, like you said, Rob, the pilots hail from the Edwards 412 Test Wing, TPS, Test Pilot School, which is situated at the 412th, and the USN TPS, U.S. Navy Test Pilot School, out at Pax River. And there's, I think, annually or biannually, there's basically a field trip where the USN TPS and the TPS out at Edwards kind of intermingle. And I wonder if some premier pilots are selected there. I still don't know the selection process for these pilots, but that's kind of my guess. And of course, there's several names within that video as well. I behoove everybody to remember the name Terry Phillips, and then his successor as executive director of OSIPJ, which is the Office of Special Projects, and SAP security director Lee M. Russ. There's plenty of names to chew on that video, none of whom are particularly good people, including Randall G. Walden, former PEO program executive officer and director of the RCO, who's now on the board of the Aerospace Corporation.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, he's in aerospace now.
So when you hear Burleson on Seco Activo on Pavel's podcast say, yeah, only the CIA and the Aerospace Corporation responded to our interrogatories, the Aerospace Corporation sent out a couple people who sat us down. They seemed interested in the topic, but they knew nothing about it. Well, tell me this. Did the Aerospace Corporation send Randall Walden? Did they send individuals like Edward C. Aldrich, or did they send little stooges who may have just joined at the executive level of Aerospace Corporation or our lead project engineers or so forth? Who exactly did they send? Because that's a very important question. What are your thoughts, Kerm? Because I could talk about this project all day, because I think at the end of the day, it was like 3.5 hours. So it's baked into my mind.
Well, I think, like, overall, I think the project did a really good job of, I think, tying all the threads specific to the Air Force. Because I know you've talked a lot about the Edwards test wing. And I think being able to show the end-to-end of, like, department, then wing, major command, like that whole top-down look, like, that documentary is going to stand on its own. And I think it's going to stand on its own for a while. Obviously the names being shared of Russell Weiler, which we've kind of talked about previously, potentially being connected to this. Terry Phillips was a new name. That was interesting to hear from you and kind of see the research there. So yeah,
I've got one thing I did want to bring up, and this is a question for you because I don't know the exact answer off the top of my head. One of the things that I really liked is you mentioned in the video that the crash retrieval team structure and, like, the organization for how that would potentially happen is not as depicted in Age of Disclosure, which depicts wrongly that JSOC would have the authority to handle this. My understanding, based on watching, your documentary, is that JSOC would not have that authority. Instead, would this be the Rapid Capabilities Office, which would have that authority to utilize Tier 1 units?
So I don't even know if it's directly Tier 1 units under a specific JSOC oversight chain of command. I specifically think that certain Tier 1 units are utilized in their own umbrella chain of command. I don't think it would be the RCO. I think the RCO specifically oversees derivative technology SAPs in relation to the AFTE and Hidden Wing. I think AQL, Special Projects, and SAP AAH, Russell Weiler's old job, Sensitive Activities, these would be the two departments that interface with the crash retrieval teams that utilize either OGA contractors, other government agency contractors, former Tier 1 guys or Tier 1 guys. But I from what I understand, RCO is specifically in the realm of reverse engineering and the derivation of technologies.
Okay.
So how about we do this, fellas? We'll start doing the Q&A. We got some great questions, and then
All right.
I have about 12 saved from YouTube, and then we'll also do some audience questions as well. So let me pull up
Okay,
this
sweet.
format.
good.
And we'll all answer these. I'll pull up a backdrop, and then I'll put the question up, and then I'll bring us back. So let's put this. Whoops, I meant to do an overlay. Okay. Here we go. First question right here. And this one I think is just pretty important. Are you guys still hearing me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
You're fine.
Okay. Can the chat still hear us? Can you guys let us know? I just want to make sure I'm not messing this up. I'm still pretty bad at live streaming stuff. So if you guys can just let us know that you're still hearing us, let us know. No.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
all good?
they can
Yes.
hear us.
Okay. Hey, I got caught by a troll. Okay, so I think this is just important for me to address real fast. And I also want to hear your guys' claims.
Mhm.
Toronto Peter, I may have answered a bit harsh, but I just do want to explain this. Toronto Peter says, my question is, what gives you the right to claim you know more about the legacy program structure than Lou Elizondo, David Grush, Chris Mellon, Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, Jim Semivan, and all those that you have insulted recently by attacking the movie The Age of Disclosure? I remind you that these men have devoted their lives to investigating UAP/NHI from within the classified world and not from the outside. Thank you. So let me just say this, because I'm sure, as you guys know, and I think you guys feel a similar way, but I'll have to ask you, I revere David Grush. I think he is the most important person that has ever existed in the public interface of this topic. What I know is a puddle, a tiny little puddle compared to David Grush. And I think lumping him in with that sentence is a little inappropriate, because I revere David Grush. And I think he's critical to this topic.
Yeah.
But as
I
far,
mean, sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Kerm.
I mean, I was just going to say, of all these names, Grush is the only one that wasn't attached to TTSA. And we kind of have thoughts about that, but
yes. And what else I want to say is that these individuals like Hal Puthoff, Chris Mellon, and Lou Elizondo, I do not know more than them. They know far more than me about legacy program structure. The problem is they are presenting the legacy program structure in a limited capacity for a specific information operation to include and exclude agencies and various offices and directorates as they see fit. So no, I don't know as much as them, but they are using a vehicle of selective disclosures to provide what they want to say. And I just thought it important that I address that, Toronto Peter. But, now we'll get to some questions that we can all talk about. So let me pull this one up. Okay.
Yeah. I just want to add to that before we move past.
Please,
just
Rob.
For everybody who's listening, working from within a classified program doesn't necessarily make somebody a more reliable source. It can just as easily make them a much more sophisticated source to deal with. Right. The history of controlled disclosure operations is very well documented. Inside access is not a credential that you should accept uncritically. And I would argue that that's very important to keep in mind in this subject.
But Toronto Peter, thanks for the question. I think, it opens up some interesting discussion. And let's see what Carpfish says here. How do you decide if disclosures you receive are curated versus honest and unfiltered? And how much of the new creator content do you believe is purposeful/directed disclosure or red herring content? So I think this is kind of a packed question, if you guys think the same. As far as addressing disclosures that I receive being honest versus unfiltered, versus honest and unfiltered versus curated. I've talked about this before, but one of the things that I do is I don't necessarily adhere to many people that come to me. The folks that I talk to that have alleged to have been within legacy programs or investigated them or run alongside them, these are people that I've spent up to 2 years seeking out. A perfect example here is Ed of the Hidden Wing. This guy I spent, I think, 18 months trying to track down. So by the time I finally got him to talk to me, I had already read his OPRs. I had already seen his history. I had already understood quite a bit about him and so forth. So it basically, it's a person by person thing to understand the intents and basically reason for the disclosures. But again, most people I talk to, the vast majority, I have to track down myself. But this second part, let's start with Kerm for this. How much of the creator content do you believe is purposeful / directed disclosures or red herring content? It's a really challenging question and interesting.
Yeah. Well, you're really putting me on the spot, man. I mean, shooting from the hip here, I'd say, I operate under the kind of just being generally skeptical now. Like I don't believe everything that I hear at face value. I put a lot of emphasis on like relationships and trust that I've built, or perceived trust that I have with certain individuals, characters, personalities, et cetera, yada, yada, yada. When new stuff comes out, I just Google in the background. I think people should be doing that more, especially now in AI age where stuff can sound plausible or legit, but then it turns out to be BS. Like recently, there's been this, it was honestly a meme, but there was a document that's been kind of surfacing on X, or Twitter, rather. I'm just going to call it Twitter. But it appears to be some type of top secret SAP document from Sandia National Labs of some artifact that they have. I don't know if you've seen this, Gerb, but it's some type of...
the artist even like spoke up about that.
Yeah. So like
it's specifically to represent like a Vajra, if I'm not mistaken, which is like, or like an Asura, which is like a Vedic type of like legendary weapon from like Hindu mythology.
Yes. But I guess my point in bringing up all this is like, especially nowadays, like when new stuff comes out, like you do kind of have to be skeptical and kind of see what parts of the story actually do make sense and do check out. Because sometimes the events or the story, it backs up with kind of what we understand or what has already been acknowledged previously. So, I mean, in terms of new creator content, like I know that there was one particular individual. I'm forgetting the name, but he was on the Redacted podcast, and he was someone that had like been to a maritime facility.
PJ or something.
Yes.
I can't remember the guy's name, but it was something J. Yeah, I know what you're speaking about.
Yeah. And so like, and not to rehash conversations we've had on prior live streams, but like a lot of this stuff, like there's just a lot of noise. There's just a lot of narratives. There's a lot of people claiming stuff. And, if you have documents, great. Like if that backs up your stuff, but until then it's like, you do kind of have to be skeptical. You do have to be professionally skeptical, for lack of a better term. So like new stuff, frankly, I haven't really seen a lot of like new UFO content that's like crazy or groundbreaking other than, Hidden Wing and Age of Disclosure and kind of that stuff. To my knowledge, I haven't there's nothing that comes to mind where I'm like, okay, this is might be what we're talking about here. But yeah, skepticism, I think it's healthy. And I know that skepticism and being a skeptic's like a dirty word within ufology, but it's important, like, especially if you want to like understand what's actually going on, like you do need to question things and you do need to ask questions. So.
Yeah. I mean, just to add on to that, like just to address some of the things that the question asks, like, for me personally, I always try and apply a bunch of different filters to like when I see things. First, does that information lead anywhere verifiable? Like, can I track this down? Is there a document that I can source? Is there something that I can verify this with? Like, when somebody's giving you like a curated form of disclosure, it tends to be self-contained, like within itself. It usually gives you like a compelling narrative. With no threads to pull. Like people tend to try and leave like no, sort of loose threads in their stories. Usually honest testimony, like even when it comes from credentialed sources or places like that, usually produces all kinds of details that you can follow up on, things that you can verify and check. But like if a claim comes to you and it's like very cool and astounding, but like forensically is kind of like sterile where there's no real way to like check on stuff, that's a big red flag. And you should always look for that whenever you're hearing any sort of testimony. And you should also sort of think to yourself like, hey, who benefits from this? What is the specific like frame that's being pushed? If a story consistently protects certain, individuals, organizations, programs, contractors, so on and so forth, or protecting certain actors from scrutiny, while appearing to expose, certain things that you may have already sort of had an idea in your head that existed, that's probably not a very reliable source of, disclosure to you. To answer the bit about the creator side, my personal opinion is that a significant portion of current UAP content creators are unwittingly probably serving some form of or like managed narrative.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and it's exactly like the 2027 thing we've talked about. I personally don't know of very many, if any, actual UFO content creators, people, whether it's doing like news of the day stuff or documentaries or hosting a podcast, that actually have a curated message to try and push. I think there are information ops like 2027 we talked about that other figures try and find mouthpieces for, whether they're witting or unwitting. Probably unwitting, actually.
I think unwitting is more common, much more common. I mean, you can get, people want to create content and they want to tell cool stories and they are interested in the subject. So, I mean, it's just as easy to get somebody with a really cool, fantastic story that they, potentially didn't vet properly than it is to, deliver them this like handcrafted narrative and get them in on it. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier to give somebody something exciting that they personally feel invested in and excited about, rather than trying to get them in on some form of conspiracy, which creates additional threads that you have to keep tied up.
So one of the cool things that I experienced with this is Chris Ramsey is one of the coolest guys I've ever met. He's an incredible guy and the most gracious host that I've ever had. When he's brought me out to Canada, he gives me the greatest time in terms of taking me out to nice meals, making sure I hang out with Luigi, really providing a great experience. And last time I did an interview with Chris Ramsey from Area 52, he publicly kind of called out Lou, having Lou on his podcast and questioning if Lou was trying to push certain narratives through his podcast or trying to frame various things for Chris's platform to convey. And I really commend him for that. I think that was a powerful thing for him. Let's go to this. Top sources to show the uninformed: Leslie Kane, Hastings, the Japan Airlines flight from '86. And what about the Malaysian Airlines and Orbs? I don't have anything about Malaysian Airlines, but I forgot that part of the question. But I love the question up to Japan Airlines '86. If you guys, let's frame this question as, what are the best introductory sources to show newcomers to the topic?
In Plain Sight by Ross Coulthart.
Lies Above by David Burkett. This is a self plug. I gotta throw it out there. But if you have any questions about like the 80-year plus cover up, I got a book that I edited by my friend David Burkett that's coming out later this year called Lies Above, which I would recommend as a good starting entry point for anybody who's not really even sold on the idea of aliens. We don't touch aliens. We touch the cover up. That's it. That's the only subject that we really address, which is the 80-year plus long cover up that the United States government is engaged in, obfuscating the subject. Aside from that, Leslie Kean's UFOs, generals, pilots, and government officials go on record. That one's really good. And then also, I like to tell people to start with John Keel books.
Nice.
Operation Trojan Horse was where I got into this subject. That was the first UFO book that I read. And as crazy of a book that is, I think it's a fantastic starting point for the uninitiated.
I think to add to that, James Fox, The Phenomenon, is a great introductory documentary. It's excellent. And that's always something I show family members who are just getting into the topic. But in Plain Sight, some Leslie Kane work, of course. Go ahead.
That, and then follow it up with The Program, which is also another James Fox certified banger as well. Like,
I wasn't a fan of The Program.
Really?
If you
I
if you guys don't want to read a book and you want to get a PDF file, you can get online for free and start there. You could go with the Loose Threads document that Omega Point and Daniel Elizondo put out.
Oh, that
helped me get started too.
That's a deep cut, man. That's
a great one. Yeah, Loose Threads. That's a really good shout out.
Yeah.
I feel like you won't be able to answer this, but it's worth a shot. Has a source ever given you information that really shook you or rattled you? Something concerning, and can you share what it was? For me, I'll keep it brief, but this is a really interesting question. Some of the things that have kind of really rattled me are some of the kinetic interactions I've heard about from retrieval groups with the occupants of the craft that are being retrieved after a crash or forcible downing, and again, kinetic encounters with the occupants of downed craft.
Gerb, are you saying we're capping aliens at the site?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
like
I don't know if they're
that's X-Files level stuff, man. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
I don't know if they're aliens, but that has been something that, I've thought about a lot because it's very disturbing to me, both the stories of some of those encounters, but also the morality between taking a presumably sentient non-human life that you're basically commandeering its vessel and ending its life, similar to the age of piracy. You're taking what is theirs and you do not care.
Yeah. I don't know. The
Have
only
you
thing
guys
that's
ever
ever
heard?
really shook me is it was not like about any program or anything like that, but it was somebody's personal like experience with their encounter. And I don't want to share like who it was because it's a friend of mine. But it was, man, I've heard like experiences before, but listening to hers was like, oh my God, what? That shook me. But I'll leave that as generic as I can.
What about you, Kerm?
I mean, I would like to say I'm not privy to inside ball information. I don't have first-handers hitting me up on DMs on Instagram with stuff or Twitter. But I mean, the stuff that I have heard about, like the retaliation aspect of like the idea that the government is openly retaliating against people that are speaking out and are trying to do the right thing, and hearing stories of brake lines getting cut, homes getting broken into, like that's just it's monstrous. Like, there's a lot of stuff in the UFO conversation that is eye-opening and it's crazy, and the subject of non-human intelligence, and that's all wild. But like I'm also interested in kind of the people problem aspect of this conversation and the things that I'm hearing of people getting retaliated against. And I think there's a concern right now where folks who do want to come out, like they don't want to come forward because their life is just going to be made way worse because of it. Like no one should really be put in this situation. And like, yes, I do appreciate that. Like there's a larger conversation with this whole subject. And I know we all kind of want to talk about that, but like, let's not forget like who's really struggling and who's suffering as a result of this stuff. And I think that needs to be talked about more.
Yeah, that's a great point out, because I'll add another thing. I remember a distinct conversation where a guy got very emotional talking about wanting to speak in a secure setting on the topic, but being threatened with inappropriate child content, and him refusing to take another step forward. And I don't blame him if there are people saying, we will destroy your life with these disgusting allegations if you proceed with your disclosures. And it just horrendous to hear the pain in that guy's voice talk about that.
No one should ever have to go through that. I mean, it doesn't matter how it doesn't matter how privy or how secret your program is. Like that's just like, we got to stop doing bad things to these people,
So let's go here. If you had the opportunity to create a plan for the government or president to acknowledge, something's in the way of my camera, that the UFO/UAP topic towards the American people, how would that look to you? What do you think is the optimum way to inform or update a country on the subject that has been discredited for so long, or for decades? I want to hear from you guys, because I kind of already said this, that the legacy topic, in my opinion, needs to first be handled with internal oversight, shifting of again, oversight of the programs before public disclosures. But I want to hear from you guys here.
Rob, if you don't want to start, I can go.
I mean, I guess what I would have to say is that I'm going to be probably on the opposite spectrum here. I'm very frustrated with the amount of like unconstitutionality that I see taking place within these programs, these, unacknowledged, no oversight programs that siphon money from the US taxpayer. To what effect, right? Like, what have we gained out of it? You can't really tell us what you've given us out of it. As far as I'm concerned, you've given us nothing and taken everything. You've harmed people in the process. I would say just reveal it all at once, and you need to begin it with a series of prosecutions that all need to take place simultaneously in a Nuremberg-style trial, where we regain oversight and regain control over, the American budgeting process as a result of this. or at least partially. But that's probably overly optimistic and will probably never happen. I'm not an amnesty guy, though. That's just me.
Yeah, and if you're here interested to hear Rob expand on that point a ton, go listen to our last live stream because you had some great points on the topic of amnesty last time.
Yeah. Not a fan.
What do you think, Kerm?
I disagree a little bit on Rob's amnesty point, but we're still friends and we can agree to disagree. I think ultimately, like I hate to say it, but I do feel a concession does need to be made at a certain extent, because these are guys that are, presumably these are the ones that are working within this program, which is presumably within the government. It's to say that these people are like, they're doing their jobs, right? Like, as far as they can tell, like, these are American patriots showing up to work every day, doing something that they probably weren't really expecting or necessarily wanted to do. Maybe some of these people did, but at the end of the day, it's like they have a job to do. Now, are we going to send people to jail for doing their job? Well, I would hope not all of them. Like, I would say the people that like have committed like actual crimes, like if you can prove it in a court of law, if there is evidence, if there is substantive stuff that you can use to prove it, yes, those people should go to jail. Like people that have been murdering American citizens. We can talk about the legality of murdering non-human intelligence, which, Kerb, I think you hinted at that with crash retrievals. Like, that's a part of the conversation, is like addressing the crimes, acknowledgement, and then an addressing of the crimes. Then you have oversight, like bringing this all under an umbrella, making sure that funds are accountable, people are accountable, that, this stuff doesn't get taken back into the black bag, if you will. And then, you kind of have a discussion of like, okay, how much of this stuff can we like really release publicly and start building science and industry around? Because I think that, if you want disclosure to do anything meaningful, you do have to understand or figure out a way to like integrate it. And that's also been a question too. I mean, we've heard before, like, say the White House in early 2000s, there was that kind of think tank meeting where they were talking about pros and cons of disclosure, and they were kind of assessing the industrial and economic kind of risks. Like that kind of brainstorming and that kind of study needs to happen again, especially if they are serious about doing disclosure right here, right now. I'm not privy to anything. I'm just a guy on Twitter. But, if I was elected president tomorrow, it would be like, hey, like, let's just cat's out of the bag. Let's address it. This is the story. This is historical stuff. I'm going to work with these agencies. And I would specify, if I was Donald Trump, I would have been like Department of Defense, Department of Energy, head of ODNI, like you three specifically going to work together, and then other agencies that fall under that umbrella. Just like I can just be as specific as possible, and that, the UFO researchers that also voted for me aren't also coming after me in the DMs like, oh, he's not serious about it. Like, no, I would be, I don't want to say I know more than the president, but look, man, he called non-human intelligence people from space on the Rogan. So it's like, you don't really know how serious this guy really takes it. But I would take it seriously, though. If I was in charge, I'd be about it. I'd be wearing my TR3B shirt, signing the executive order. Like, believe it, bro. So.
All right, lads, let's go to this one. From what you understand, what contractor in FFRDC has made the largest strides forward in reverse engineering and application of reverse engineering technologies? This is a very short thing for me. FFRDC, the MITRE Corporation, contractor Northrop Grumman.
Yeah.
Do you guys have similar?
I think I would have to just answer the same because we're sort of operating off of the same information for the most part. Yeah, no, I'd have to go with that. They're the only ones that we have like real, at least like trails of information to say that like, yeah, these guys have probably operated or worked on derivative vehicles of some type. So
here's a follow-up question, just I guess for the sake of the audience. Is this an FFRDC that is a named and acknowledged FFRDC, or is this a group that is not publicly known?
No, MITRE. Absolutely various elements.
Yes, but like, is the FFRDC itself, is this like a known entity? Like, is this something that like, exists, or is this like something else? Because we know the number of FFRDCs that exist publicly, or at least like we know like there's 35 or so of them now.
No, acknowledged FFRDC, MITRE.
Okay.
And super, super, super confident on that. Really confident.
I mean, shoot, I went by their offices near Eglin Air Force Base the other day.
Yeah, the
Just a
nondescript
super
little.
nondescript building.
Let's
With
go
like
here,
a
gang.
shit. Look, my wife pointed it out to me afterwards. She goes, "Honey, you realize how many security cameras were on that building, right?" And
Mhm.
like I looked at it and I'm like, "Oh wow!" Like I'm looking at the picture, I'm like, "Wow, they definitely got me on there."
Let's go here. Do you guys feel that the Congress is not really looking into this reality, and they are just saying whatever for likes and popularity? They say
Yeah.
the name. They say they have names, but never say them. Uh,
Mhm.
Essentially, to shorten this question, is Congress actually investigating the topic or doing a performative act? Uh, what do you guys think?
Porque no los dos?
Luna is a good example of the Porque no los dos, in my opinion.
Yeah,
She loves the theatrics,
exactly.
loves the drama. I do think she has some care for the topic.
There are representatives that take this very seriously, and their staffs that actually take it seriously too. I would say that
Mhm.
Burleson is probably the best
Yes,
example
he
of this.
is.
Burchett is
Yes.
another great example. I would say Nancy Mace actually takes this seriously, as does who else was it? Moskowitz takes it very seriously too.
Yes. Moskowitz, I want
there's a-
Moskowitz to be more engaged. He's very
Yeah.
intelligent.
Yeah, I would like that too. I would like that too. There's a couple task force members that, like in the last hearing that we were at, were highly engaged. I just don't think that the task force offers them enough dedicated time, and the political environment allows them enough dedicated time for them to be able to make that a priority that
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
think would contribute to their ability to get reelected. So I think that, there's some people that are absolutely engaged. Burleson, at least his electorate just doesn't care. Like they support it. So like he can go whole hog, but other people have a lot more reservation there. I think just for interaction with like staffs and like seeing it in action. So
Yeah. I also think it's just worth mentioning, like this federal secrets task force, like, yes, they are looking into UFOs, but that's on top of Epstein files, JFK,
Mhm.
MLK, RFK, 9/11. I think I already said Epstein, COVID. Like there's so many other things that the administration has mandated that they want disclosure on. And judging by how things are going with the Epstein files, I think we are all kind of thinking it, but not going to say it. Like, I don't know if the UFO disclosure is going to happen in such a great,
right.
like it's not going to be done correctly, just judging by how the Epstein situation's playing out. But
one of the key aspects of the Secrets Task Force is that the Secrets Task Force is a subcommittee of the House Oversight Committee. Now, the way the House Oversight Committee works is that it is controlled by whoever is the majority party in the House at the time, which at this point is the GOP, the Republican Party.
mhm.
The head of the House Oversight Committee is the only one that holds the subpoena power that the House Oversight Committee utilizes. They individually wield that subpoena power. So that would be James Comer, who wields that subpoena power. And when the task force is said to have quote unquote subpoena power, it is at the discretion of James Comer,
Mhm.
who is very much a Trump administration loyalist and will use that subpoena power in a way that only meets their political needs. Subpoena power traditionally is used in this fashion as well. So,
And let's not forget that this is the House we're talking about here. The Senate from about 2017 to 2023 had its own fingers in the pies of the UFO topic, and there were key senators that were too cowardly or unable to act on this information, including Marco Rubio and Kirsten Gillibrand. So none of that was performative because it wasn't really public, but there were certain political figures that were unwilling to stake their reputation on this topic, and
yeah, I've heard
I
that
shame
Rubio
them.
from his staffers is apparently somebody who will never take point.
No, no, as no, Rubio, absolutely not.
Lame.
What is the wildest thing you've ever been told off record? Can't verify, but you have a feeling that it's actually true.
Oh man. Oh man. How do I
I don't
answer
know.
this?
I don't know why I'm acting like I'm privy to inside knowledge.
I mean, you're privy to at least a little bit of things that you've been told happened, but we have no way of verifying, right?
Yeah, on 4chan and on X, big dog. I'm not like I'm not like privy
I mean,
to state
you've heard
secrets.
rumors at conferences we've been to together. Like, for example, we've heard a rumor of there being like a high definition HD, like ultra HD 4K, like aerial FLIR video of this like JSOC team being mowed down by contractors. We've heard that before. I've heard that. And I believe you were at the conference when we heard that rumor too.
This is the 2004 Lockheed JSOC.
If I'm not mistaken, I don't remember a year
Allegedly?
being attached to the
Okay.
rumor that we heard, but like, yeah, that's probably that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess
That was
maybe
one of
I
the
am
wilder
pretty-
things I've ever heard.
Okay. Yeah, that is pretty wild.
JSOC is Joint Special Operations Command, for those in chat who are wondering.
I would say completely unrelated to 4chan, Kerm, but that there is an enormous craft near Bermuda underwater that seems to release or build Tic Tac shaped craft and release them into the nearby environment for whatever purpose. And that is completely unrelated to the infamous 4chan whistleblower, but that's one of the wildest things that I feel very highly is true.
Yeah,
you heard this independently of the 4chan thing? Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
Tic Tacs, only Tic Tacs?
Could be more, but what I heard was Tic Tacs.
Yeah, Tic Tacs were never mentioned on 4chan. 4chan, just to clear it up with whoever said that in chat, the 4chan whistleblowers specifically mentioned that they were just bespoke shapes that like suited whatever the needs of the time
Built
were.
to spec.
They never mentioned Tic Tac specs. Yeah, they never mentioned the Tic Tac shape specifically. So.
Right. It's essentially like if you had a laboratory just draping a tarp over the top, and whatever shape the laboratory is in, the tarp would fit that mold essentially. So the shape and orientation of the craft are just built to spec to satisfy whatever internals exist in the craft.
Yeah.
What about this? A couple more questions. Do you think that the light that became the triangle that Dylan Borland saw was an ARV of some kind with advanced camouflage system? And then what crash retrieval cases what crash retrieval cases are there that you haven't made a project on but hold in high regard or want to make a project on in the future? Number one, what do you guys think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, too. But what's interesting is I have spoken to Dylan about this, and he still maintains he does not think it is. But I maintain, that I think this was.
Yeah, we actually Tim and I talked about this like a week or so ago. I think it's an ARV, but I mean, yeah.
And I'm guessing it's an ARV based upon that electro-optic cloaking system that I know there were other efforts to adapt in both Army and Air Force.
I don't want to say too much about that, but yeah.
I don't think it was a NASA vehicle, though. I remember from Borland's testimony in Congress, he mentioned that like it was interesting because it was coming from the direction of a NASA hangar, but I don't think that necessarily means that NASA
and
has this.
I want to point out that that's been taken out of context a lot of times when people try and misquote Dylan on that. They try and say that he saw it come from the NASA hangar. No,
it came from the direction.
Say that. He said it came from the direction of it. And people have tried to also criticize that, like, oh, well, based on my knowledge of the base, he couldn't have seen the NASA hangar from there. No, he couldn't have. He said it came from the direction of the NASA hangar.
I think there's an argument that could be made that craft came out of Air Force Air Combat Command, ACC, but that's that remains to be seen. What about crash retrieval cases? For me, I think not Roswell, but different crashes around the same epoch in relative areas, such as the crash at Corona and so forth. Those are some cases I'd like to cover in more detail. I'm trying to think of other ones. Do you guys have some off the top of your mind that intrigue you that haven't talked about very much?
I mean, no, just because all the crash retrievals that are probably the coolest happened underwater and we don't know about them.
Yeah, I would also like to see I'd like to see more research and work on the February shoot down, specifically the Yukon UFO, because there was some reporting of like apparently there was like a leaked satellite image from I think presumably the Canadian military that showed like a horseshoe shaped object. It's just crazy because like that preceded Grush coming forward and all that. It was like shoot downs happened 2022. Grush comes forward the year after. I'd like to see more on that. Actually, sorry, I think it was 2023 was when the shoot
have you covered Kecksburg in detail? I think you have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
including James Webb, various other individuals going to the Texas White House of Lyndon B. Johnson the day after the Kecksburg crash.
Yeah.
The Kecksburg crash is one I hold in high regard. And
Well,
magenta.
that's-
I see. I see
Go
in the
ahead.
comments some folks talking about magenta, and I have talked about magenta now. The project that and Kingman specifically are not up to snuff for what I do now, so I might revisit them just for better projects and more well-rounded projects. But have talked
Kingman
about
is a
magenta.
cool
Yeah.
hash recovery.
I've got my hands on some Kingman media that has been considered lost media that I do plan to put into a video.
Oh, that's
I'm
pretty
looking
cool.
forward to that.
If you guys have heard, if you've heard of the work of Harry Drew,
I don't think so. No.
Okay, well, you guys are in for a treat. Go look at there are some lost media by a Kingman researcher who would actually travel and give tours to the crash site. A documentary of his called 7 Days in May that is considered lost media because
Cool.
Harry Drew, when he references Kingman, talks about 3 crashes, not one. And he says the second of the 3 crashes are what Arthur Stancil Jr. went to at the behest of Dr. Ed Dahl, that of course Eric Henry Wang worked on. But there were 2 other crashes. What's interesting to me in the documentary is that Harry Drew actually finds old Army ration cans at the crash site that has drops of solder on them and various little cosmetic and various details on the cans that began to go into effect in 1952, 1953. So a little drop of solder on top to keep the food or the materials in there fresh longer actually lines up with really interesting timetables. So that's going to be a fun one to talk about. Let's go to this. Do you think with the abundance of NHI and UAP info coming out in the recent months/years that there's a push for clarification on the subject? Like, do you think anyone in the DoD, DOE, et cetera, have most of the answers, or it's spread out across compartmentalized to where no one has the whole piece of the puzzle? Thank you very much, the light side 282. So I think that's 2 questions there. With the abundance of UFO stuff coming out, is there a push for clarification on the subject? And 2, we will talk about basically what could be considered the UFO control group. Kerm, why don't you kick us off with part 1 of the question?
Push for clarification. I hope it is. I hope they are pushing for clarification, but again, this is the same president that's covering up for his friendly relationships with Mr. Jeffrey Epstein. So I don't know, curb my enthusiasm. The second point, spread out and compartmentalized. Yeah, I mean, that seems to be what the research leads to and what that seems to conclude. I think a lot of the people that have come out from the legacy program and they've spoken about what they know, like there is stuff that we're unclear of, and either that's because they weren't read into certain aspects or they just didn't understand that part or whatever. We don't really know for certain, but we have some pretty good clues. And I think overall the clues are that, like, overall this program is structured for the biggest, like, I guess the highest priority being secrecy and enforcing that secrecy. And that often supersedes like the actual work of reverse engineering this technology or building weapons. And we've heard that from whistleblowers of like the secrecy supersedes like the actual work that's going on in these projects. And like that kind of causes problems within the programs, supposedly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say personally with regards to the question, I think both things can be true at the same time. Like, yes, there are people in the DoD and the DOE who hold very significant pieces of this puzzle, and like compartmentalization sort of means that most of them have no idea like what their neighbors are working on, which of course is by design, like for secrecy reasons, and it's documented sort of how those special access programs are structured. But I think that like what's underappreciated here is that even like full transparency on like every single program probably would not give us a complete picture of the phenomenon itself whatsoever. If you put all the pieces together that everybody in every intelligence compartment had, I still don't think you're going to get a full picture of what's going on. But that's just my opinion.
So to throw in my 2 cents, part 1, yeah, of course, there have been efforts for clarification on the subject, most of the time partial clarification, as we've talked about with the ATIP program, Hillary Clinton, Elizondo 2017, and so forth. Part two, to agree with Rob and to also expand on that, I do think there are individuals specifically within the DOE that have major pieces of the puzzle, but that over time, the modern day legacy program structure, we will say it started in 1947 after the Roswell case. At one point, the legacy program portfolio, at least from what I understand, was a galvanized Manhattan Project 2.0 of great gung-ho Americans, centralized leadership, great secrecy protocols under the 1954 Atomic Energy Act. And then over time, with various expansions of SAP controls, special access program controls, and SAP funding mechanisms, and various SAP reforms that started to take place during the Cold War, legacy programs morphed and molded to take advantage of these, creating cover offices, creating cover programs, finding new funding structures through interesting and intriguing ways. And over time, legacy ostensibly scattered itself into the wind of just insane secrecy, folding over itself, folding under itself, hiding itself in different corners. So the last central figure, of course, at least from what I understand, was, of course, Dick Cheney. And once he left in about 2009 as VP is when a lot of central oversight and central leadership of the programs fell apart. And the closest thing we've had to that has been James Clapper. But as far as a whole piece of the puzzle, like a Cheney type entity, I don't know if we'll ever get that happen again. And this isn't even to talk about the possibility of certain contractors running off and doing their own crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs. That, believe it or not, is a thing.
Distinct possibility, yeah.
Rogue programs.
I would also point out that another thing to consider, given what Gerb just mentioned, is it's entirely possible that right now, individuals that are currently in positions of authority in the legacy program may actually know less than what the legacy program knew in the past, through the loss of institutional knowledge and the fact that a great deal of this knowledge is not written down in any appreciable format. It has to be passed down from secure individual to secure individual, and not all of that information can be duly imparted onto the next individual at all times.
That's a great point, Rob. And I want to expand on that because there is a specific thing with this onion model of always another layer of secrecy below and a layer of protection above that I've been exposed to. And this is a certain, I'm not going to say what it is, but a certain institution that in about 2011 made a concerted effort not to brief new legacy program incumbents on legacy history. And this was to tighten in on the institutional secrecy and control over the programs. So some legacy individuals that joined this specific subset of programs post 2011 do not have any sort of understanding of legacy activities pre 2011. And that's why for some of these old goats, this is really a race against time. When people like Donald Kerr die, Edward C. Aldrich die, Bobby Ray Inman die, there is a trove of institutional knowledge lost with them. So for some of these people, it really is a race against time. And then if we lose some of this knowledge, we're going to be stuck in the same situation of the Army Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, IPU, having to chase it down through institutional memory from FOIA. So it really is a race against time. I don't mean to be doomer or sensationalist there. Let's get one here too. I have a question. Please consider it for the future. Can we subpoena employees who work at these defense contracting companies? Can't we somehow gain access to the private information because the public information is locked up pretty tight? So instead of fighting the government for disclosure, why can't we get public companies to release the information? There's got to be some kind of path that they can break NDAs over other restricting aspects. I want to hear what you guys have to say here. But to start, that has been tried to be done before with Lockheed Martin and the Kona Blue Prospective Special Access Program in 2009. Glenn Gaffney came in, gave him a slap on the wrist because Mary Sturtevant relayed to Gaffney that what Lockheed was doing. And he said, no, you are not doing this. But let's expand on that question because I do think it's a meaty question and I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Well, the way I kind of think about it is like, I don't know. I don't want to say like the premise of the question's bad, but if you think about it, like these contractors, like their customer is the government. So they serve at the mercy of their customer. The customer is always right. Like that's true in all forms of business. And if you think about it, like if you go back to 2023, when David Grush first comes forward, there were journalists, I'm forgetting the names, but they actually asked Lockheed Martin on the record of like, hey, there was a hearing in Congress and testimony indicated that defense companies are implicated in this cover up. And I remember Lockheed Martin's response was questions about aliens and UFOs are best addressed by the federal government. So in that response alone, it kind of indicates that even when they get the request or the subpoena, they often defer to the government because, again, the government's their customer. They're the ones that are actually managing and running this program from like a purely regulatory, compliance perspective. Now, it's not to say that they are fully compliant. That's kind of why we're here, because they are breaking the law, and how they're able to do that and the structure of that. That's kind of why we have the YouTube channel. But I mean, long story short, I think it's naive to like go straight after the contractors. I think you first have to address kind of the top of the pyramid, so to speak. And that's like the Dick Cheneys of the world, the major managers, what have you. But I mean, more effectively, the actual structure that then leads to the rest of the pyramid, which includes the defense contractors. So that's just kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that in the past, congressional subpoenas can definitely reach private contractors, and they do have that authority. But when a contractor employee invokes like a security-related NDA, my understanding is that Congress in the past has historically backed down from trying to challenge that. Which is part of why like the UAP Disclosure Act's whistleblower provisions were important. They were supposed to be designed to like create a set of statutory carve-outs that allow cleared individuals to report like designated congressional offices without having to trigger their NDA liability, because it's a lawful disclosure. Like you could litigate to like compel contractor testimony, but like I'm pretty sure that the federal government in most cases is going to intervene and assert like the state secrets privilege, which my understanding is that's never been able to be challenged in court ever. And then, beyond that, I think that the only other way that you could try and go about this is like through securities law. Publicly traded defense contractors have disclosure obligations to their shareholders.
Yep.
And there's probably like a credible legal argument there that concealing a program of this significance from investors contributes like a material omission.
Yes.
So that's something Kermit and I have talked about in the past. It's, that's an SEC enforcement mechanism you'd have to go through, and that hasn't really been pursued by lawmakers. It's something I think should be pursued, but we'll see where that goes.
I will say on that point, just because like this is the part of the conversation that I find fascinating, like there is a possibility, I'll just say it this way. There is a possibility that this has already been cleared with the SEC, and there is a process to do that. So typically what defense companies can do if they want to, say, withhold classified information in their financials because they're doing secret work for the government and they don't want to disclose that to everybody, they can send basically a memorandum to the SEC saying, hey, this is what we got going on from a high level. This is why we can't disclose it. Here's a signature from the OCA or whoever's running this program, and this is our justification. And that's kept on file with the SEC so that going forward, they don't disclose that stuff. And then legally speaking, if say a investor comes forward and says, hey, I didn't know about this, and there's, all this stuff, the SEC has records.
State secrets. Yeah.
Yes. But it's like all this documentation, basically it takes the blame off of SEC of like, hey, we didn't know about, like, we knew about this and like we followed.
Sure, a lot of the primes have that already lined up.
Yeah, and it saves the contractors themselves from legal liability, because it's like, well, we already cleared this with the SEC. I don't know why you guys are asking us for a bunch of money, Yeah. So I would love for the whistleblowers that are speaking out, especially like contractor groups that are speaking out, like they deserve to have compensation, like for going through the stuff that they've gone through. I know that there's been some voices. I know Borland's talked about, the SEC whistleblower provision that allows for up to 10% of recovered funds to go back to the parties that helped report it in the first place. I would like to see that play out. I think it is going to be difficult to see that happen and facilitate that, especially because like we're talking about a highly sensitive program of like government nature. And like, I don't think we've ever really seen this before in the case of like financial crimes in the past or like what DOJ's prosecuted. So this is it's a new case. It's a unique and it's a interesting kind of out of this world case. And I mean, I don't think that's surprising to say to anybody here, but yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also highly confident that the actual structure of the programs with defense industrial base primes and their subcontractors at the lowest level is specifically structured to avoid instances of this, that the FFRDC, the MITRE Corporation, the Sandia, filters down and arbitrates knowledge to the prime contractor, as well as holds on to materials to avoid such situations. And indeed, in the same vein, I am super skeptical that, bar a really weird scenario like Kona Blue and James Ryder, that contractors like Lockheed Martin absolutely do not hold recovered UFOs in their own installations. Like the old Lockheed Burbank plant would not house a UFO. No, it is the GOCO, the FFRDC institutions that Lockheed sends their principal engineers to look. So I think the structure of the programs is set up to specifically to avoid instances like this. And when Hal Putoff says most of the programs are kept in contractors to avoid from FOIA, I just think that's phooey. Let's do this, guys. We have a couple super chats. Let's go through them. And while we go through those, the folks in the audience, list your questions, put them in all caps, and we'll spend 15, 20 minutes going through questions, and then we'll call it a day. How does that sound to you guys?
Sounds good to me, man.
Okay, because I remember all the way back, I hope he's still watching. We got Max Bar.
Hey,
that's Max our boy.
Bar. Thanks
so
much.
OG.
Max Bar is a beautiful mind in this topic, and he's a wonderful person, very smart guy. This is from Brandon Johnson 1. This is back when we were talking about the 2027 stuff. I'm sorry we're 2 hours off, but thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. This is from Dino Complizierts. Will U.S. military might use secret alien tech soon in war with Iran these days? We talked about this earlier, and I hope we got to the point well enough. But what we all said and agreed on was with prosaic and human-made technologies that provide an asymmetric warfare advantage over Iranian warfare capabilities, there is no need, and such technology would not be risked.
Kermdog's official statement is that the 4chan guy that was talking about alien technology in Iran, that was probably a lark. But he did, like, I don't know. It's like he was making kind of a claim that could always be proven true of like imminent attack on Iran, and it just kept on getting delayed because like we weren't attacking Iran. And not to like get into it, but there's certain things in the timetable of this particular poster where it's like the dude was probably LARPing. Like he wasn't like aware of any like privy deep, like he's not in the Negev desert with alien technology. Like, come on, man. So yeah, they use cruise missiles. I don't think they used alien stuff, but I'd like to be proven wrong.
Telekinetic says, thoughts on Sergeant Clifford Stone's crash retrieval testimonies. He was present at several worth picking up on the trail on his placements. I don't know what that second part says, but Clifford Stone, that's a person that I have not devoted a tremendous amount of time through. I know Clifford Stone has talked about various NHI species, but my knowledge base is not adequate enough there. So I don't really have any poignant conversational topics. What about you guys?
I don't know a ton about Cliff Stone myself. You know, I don't know a lot of the details of his accounts, but I do know that his accounts have grown more exotic over time. And have
I think he's
changed a
passed
bit.
now.
Yeah. So that's one of those situations where I would probably, if I were to get into researching his claims, I would probably sit down and build a, you know, big spreadsheet with all of his claims over time and, you know, mark like how they've changed, if any, a lot like what one of the Reddit users that I saw did with Dr. D'Souza from the Moment of Contact. So it's, you know, sometimes that's the only way you can really keep track of these things. But, you know, can't really speak to him specifically. I just know how I would go about it if I did.
So Calm says, shout out Bob Lazar. Thank you, Calm. And indeed, I still cannot definitively prove or debunk Bob's testimony or the likes, but my personal interactions with Bob, he was a very kind and personable man. He was extremely polite as well, which I always appreciate out of somebody. He was not a diva. Chris and Jesse didn't pay Bob to come or anything. It was an arm and a leg to get Bob there, but I think out of his respect for Luigi, he agreed to. So it's not like Bob was doing a press tour or something and said, I got to hop on this. So official Diadonax, thank you so much, man. I've seen you in the chat a bunch today and so forth. Appreciate all the work, gentlemen. Check your DMs. Would love to help with data compilation and leveraging AI tools to get a clearer picture of the entities, money flows, and possible FOIA targets. blessings to you all. My friend, I believe he is in the Discord, Official Diatonic.
Yes,
So if so,
very much so. He's
Kermit
very
and
active.
Rob,
Cool
yeah,
dude.
of course, you know that these two gentlemen are in the Discord, so let's rendezvous there. And Rob, while I'm going through these, would you be so kind as to put a Discord link in the chat just for anybody who wants to join in? It's a great group. It's
Sure.
if we great, thank you. It's a great group. It's not huge, but everybody there contributes and says some interesting stuff. So would love to see anybody there.
Yeah.
UFO
I'm gonna
technology.
add, just before we move on, just so
Sure.
that I can make this statement, I've got a very small moderation team on the Discord. The ban hammer comes swiftly and strongly. Please try and keep things on topic there, and polite and civil is the main thing that we ask. That's all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rob, Griff, and Scrums have been a godsend. Just with how in depth my work has gotten, I don't have a ton of time to be on Discord. It's really hard. So these guys have been a godsend, and it's just been a huge help.
I will say
I
I
actually
recently,
can't share it in the chat because I'm not a moderator in your chat.
You're not? How?
No. Here, I'll
try and fix that.
Say something in the chat.
I will say
Like
I
mod
recently I recently started yapping a little bit more in the Discord, and I
Thank you,
apologize.
Scrums. I appreciate it.
I apologize to DK Wolf. I accidentally stole your Stephen Greer Fortnite meme, which actually, by the way, I do have another PowerPoint slideshow. It's like just straight memes, like UFO memes, if we want to go through that at the end. It's just like very quick. But yeah, just wanted to say what's up to Mr. Wolf, and sorry I stole your meme.
Yeah, Diatonics, I'll put it in the video description as well once we're done with the live and I have it uploaded. So yeah, if anybody's watching wants the Discord there as well, I'll have it. UFO technology, thank you so much. Do you trust anything I put out on X? I have no interest in the spotlight, but I will bring the technology into light. I must do a deeper dive on your post on X, my man. Like I just said, with the stuff I'm doing lately, pretty much all of my mental faculties have just got to be directed at kind of one thing, especially with this topic. There's so much information overload.
Yes.
At any given time, it could be looking at a billion different things. Just bear with me. I'll check out your stuff, but I really appreciate you, Ben.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we run into a lot in this subject, especially now that like I think we end up on enough media and people have enough exposure to us. Is dude, my inbox is so slammed. Like I remember like talking to somebody and they're like, oh dude, my inbox is slammed, I can't read anything in there. And I'm like, oh yeah, bullshit, man. I read every email I ever get and every message I ever get. Now I'm like, oh my God, I feel awful all the time because people send me all sorts of cool stuff and I'm like 3 months behind in trying to get the stuff, and I like have job interviews and meetings and stuff lined up all over the place. It's just what I'm trying to say is we're very sorry whenever we don't answer stuff.
Yeah, I gotta say that as well, man. All the time in the chats I see people saying, hey, I sent you an email, can you get back to me? And I have to publicly apologize to everybody. I'm so far behind on my communications. I get really behind just because I got to focus so much on stuff, but I promise I'll try and do better. James Grover, thank you, my friend. Does anyone have an update on the files they were supposed to release to the National Archives from last year's NDAA? I believe some files were uploaded, correct? And these were mostly photos. These were some inconclusive photos of UFOs, specifically discs that had been floated around the public zeitgeist for years before. Am I remembering this correctly from last year?
Yes, and wasn't there also a release of like Border Patrol, like CBP data as well, like some of the stuff that they were?
I think that was 2024, but yeah, in the same. I think it also went to the National Archives.
Okay, it might have been 2024. Yeah, nothing crazy. I'm waiting on the 4K video of a triangle shooting out of the water, or the one that was like underneath the water going super fast. I mean, come on, when are we going to see something that's not a grainy dot on a film? I mean, come on.
Nicholas News Ad, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for your great work. And my T Brain says, thoughts on public reverse engineering efforts, UFO samples like Art's Parts, Dolnagorsk, Ubatuba, etc., have a very large host of potentially engineerable info. For me personally, I have very little thoughts or exposure or worthwhile information to add, just because my specialty is, of course, legacy programs and crash retrievals. Have you guys at SCU had run-in with the Arts Parts crew, did you not?
Yes,
Yeah,
we did.
I was actually going to mention that. We, Kermit and I had a pretty cool experience hanging out with the Falcon Space guys with Mark Sokol and Jared Yates. We went out, got some drinks, maybe hit the Waffle House, and then took Waffle House back to the house and checked out the Arts Parts on the pool table there, which was pretty fun. But to directly address the question, to address like your concerns, one of the things that I think I learned from talking to Jared and Mark, and then Matthew Sadigas, and talking to Kevin Knuth a little bit, is that with regards to public reverse engineering efforts, money is definitely the problem. Money, and the fact that some of the better methods to test these things also involve destruction. So there's a limited amount of like material that you have to work with. You have a limited amount of funding to work with. And then also the big scary one is that if you find something really crazy, you might get roped into a CRADA and have your stuff taken.
Yeah.
So
the invention secret.
Yeah, a CRADA is a cooperative research and development agreement, which is what our TTSA entered into with the U.S. Army at at Redstone Arsenal, and it's part of why you never saw any of the actual scientific results from the TTSA materials whatsoever.
And also what largely driven, and it's also what largely driven the public findings, the declassified stuff that they did say of like, oh yeah, no, it was from a missile piece.
Yeah.
Speaking of TTSA, I'd love to see Tom DeLonge make another public appearance and talk about what he's been up to in the last couple of years. That'd be pretty interesting to me.
Last I heard,
just being pissed off at getting burnt, at being used as an information vector.
That's what I'd like to hear him talk about.
Yeah, you got that, but also like last I heard, like he's trying to get Blink 182 back together. Like there was some stuff.
Oh, they are back together. They're touring.
Yeah, but like one of their band members, like he contracted cancer, was diagnosed, and that became a huge reason why Tom kind of came back, because he basically all but left Blink 182 to become the UFO TTSA guy, but he's kind of had a come back to Blink 182 moment. That was last I heard about that. I'm not big on their music. I'm more of a underground trap rapper as a guy from the Deep South, but to each their own.
My wife told me I was allowed to make a career pivot into UFOs if it got us the ability to meet Tom DeLonge at some point. So I do have to fulfill that mission objective at some point.
I'd love to meet him.
You and me both.
How confident are you that NSA Naval Support Activity Crane has a dumb, deep underground military base housing off-world technologies? I'm going to retrofit that question a little bit and say that the Naval Surface Warfare Center on NSA Crane, I am unsure about the how much of this facility is an actual dumb, but from other testimony outside of Randy Anderson, with high confidence, I will state that the Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane houses facilities, or a SAPF that houses recovered non-human technologies. And that's from other independent individuals. And this is a big shout out to Kerm, because way back in the day, I enlisted the help of Kerm to track down some of Crane's contract vessels and their spending with various Sandia contracts for IT services for nearly $500 million and so forth. So,
and what was interesting, you're missing out though on the more interesting stuff, because when we looked at the SAIC contracts, we noticed that a lot of those were seemingly taken off the interwebs.
Most of them were there.
A lot of the hypersonic contracts, like, okay, interesting.
And then, of course, the Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane and Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren have interesting contracts with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, which, by the excellent reporting of Chris Sharp, was quite a while ago associated with maritime UFO crash retrieval. So another interesting thing to talk about. Hey, this
my grandpa used to be the command master chief at Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren.
That's right. What? Yes, that is wild.
Yeah, my stepdad grew up on that base.
Wow. When do you think the U.S. would use their ET-derived tech? What are their thresholds for unveiling / use? Rob Jones? I know we talked about this before, but...
Yeah, it's when an enemy has an asymmetric warfare advantage over us. That type of technology is exclusively for usage when you realize that you are actually in the position of less power, which the United States has almost never found itself in since 1947. They have theory crafted themselves into feeling like they're in a position of less power against the Soviet Union. But like in reality, the United States has never been in a position of less power and thus never been in a position to actually utilize edge technologies like that in the combat situation.
I largely agree with that, but just to kind of build on it, I think the premise of nuclear war in itself, I think necessitates these vehicles and like building strategic technology. And I'm not the only one to say this. I think that like when we talk about ARVs, I think the highest and best use case in the deep state, if you will, is
would be to stop a nuclear war,
to try to win a nuclear war. So this is a little bit different because like the current paradigm is like we have the nuclear triad, the missiles take an hour to fly through the air, and then all life on Earth is done in an hour. But with these vehicles, when you're talking about stuff that can go from A to B in less than a minute or even faster, or talk about teleportation, stuff like that, like the long and short of it is that you now have an asset that can move a nuclear warhead to its target way, way faster than a missile. And I can tell you that a lot of these crazy Pentagon planners, like, you know, the Curtis LeMays of the back in the day, like they were all trigger happy. They wanted to start nuclear war, have a first strike. They wanted to get it over with and they wanted to win. And I think when you talk about these vehicles and disclosure and like the use case for it, it's like, I think these are kind of held in the event that, say, missiles start flying with Russia. I think that was probably the first use case. And then now the paradigm kind of switching over towards China, because they are also kind of the same level threat. And I think also Russia and China have their own programs too. So, and this all gets really interesting because then you also remember back to Matthew Livelsberger and that whole sequence of events and the supposed manifesto. Yeah. But like he was talking about how China also has a program and that, you know, these vehicles, basically it raises the stakes of World War III past what I think the public likes to think about. And no one wants to think about nuclear war because, you know, everyone dies and it's not great. But this significantly elevates the stakes. And if this stuff does exist, I imagine this is that rainy day that they're kind of pricing in here. So highest and best use case as an accountant. I saw that comment. Yes, I am an accountant. Yes, I do use corpus speed. Get with it, bro.
I think you guys are spot on. And to add to that, just use now, I think is very restricted specifically for derivative vehicles, for ISR type use cases, for joint NRO and Air Force projects or programs. I think it's very strict and selective use case.
Yeah.
Here's one we talked about, but I just want to say it again, just to really drill in the point. Cameron, let's say there are ARVs, LOL at Eric Davis. Where are the pilots from, and do you think one will ever come out and speak? Imagine joining the Air Force to be a pilot and you end up flying an ARV. Again, USN TPS, U.S. Navy Test Pilot School out of Pax River, and the Air Force TPS out of Edwards Air Force Base, housed at the Edwards 412 Test Wing. Will we ever get one to come out and speak? Probably not, unless huge strides are made. But again, USN TPS and Edwards TPS.
If one of y'all ARV pilots...
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if one of y'all ARV pilots is on the stream, talk to Gerb. Or you can hit me up on Twitter too, if his inbox is full.
or me, feel free. But I mean, what I would say is like these are like your Captain America guys. These are from Men in Black, best of the best of the best, sir, with honors. Like that's who you select for this role. Those guys are not talking. I don't think you're ever going to get an ARV pilot to talk unless they have a congressional mandate to do so.
Yes.
While an average, let's go with Edwards. While an average TPS graduate who then transitions into a major, a lieutenant colonel role at some sort of test and evaluation program out of the Air Force may be involved and briefed into legacy program aspects on derivative vehicles, it is only the tip of the spear, the absolute best and brightest that would be chosen for such operations. How about this? Because we talked about it a little bit with China and Russia. Any other countries other than the US, have legacy programs? You guys talked about China and Russia. What else?
I mean, other Five Eyes nations almost certainly like have programs that feed into ours.
Yeah.
What's your theory, Kerm?
I think, yeah. So like Five Eyes, like I think there's like asymmetric information to the extent that like the US knows more than our allies. So in that case, like, yes, we do have relationships with like the UK and Australia. Like we have facilities, locations, we got operations there, maybe some craft held overseas. On the other side of the coin, when we're looking at adversaries, I potentially see like a North Korea kind of being used like how the US uses a UK or one of our allies, of kind of like a, it's out of our homeland. It's relatively secure because this is a tightened down autocracy. A lot of deep underground military installations. This is a mountainous country. So not to interject with the conspiracy theory, but like that's something I like to think about. But yeah, I agree kind of with all the points. And like I said, I think major powers such as Russia, US, China, like we all have a tangible history with this stuff, and we probably have materials in a program. Yeah.
Here's a good question that we should figure out. What days/times do you guys stream? I like what I'm hearing. Cheese in my pockets, Velveeta, 2195.
Cheese in my pockets, Velveeta.
We're still trying to figure that out, man. I get so busy, like trying to get my projects out. It takes up all of my time. We're still trying to figure that out. And you know, Kerm and Rob are two voices that I always have these guys on the live streams, because I think more than almost anyone else in this topic, the community needs to hear from these guys. They're both so intelligent and have their own intriguing avenues of research they go down that I love talking with these guys. And I hate doing lives alone also. It's super awkward staring at a screen. So what better than to have two intelligent guys and two in real life friends to talk about things? So we're still trying to figure that out, because we don't just want to get on and talk about news of the day type stuff. It's been a long time since our last live stream, and there's been so much to talk about. So, you know, this is on me, because I haven't been able to kind of get my crap together and figure this out yet, but we got to get together and figure out a more regular time.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'll have a more regular schedule here soon so we can figure that out.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, I feel like the impetus for this live stream has just been a lot of the stuff that's been going on recently. And so, and the stuff that's been going on recently is really just an announcement for a next announcement. So if we do hear on said announcement, if we do see, you know, say some more stuff on Arrow or some more stuff in Congress, like we'll be here, we'll be talking about it. We'll of course convene on certain matters. So I would love to have I mean, speaking for myself, I'd love to have a regular cadence. That'd be fun, but you know, totally fine with the arrangement as it is, frankly.
And the thing is, because you guys are such good friends in real life, I try and get these guys in boots on the ground whenever there's something to be done in person. So, you know, last time I don't have a media team, but I got you guys in the hearing as like my media team.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Which was great. And then, of course, Kerm, you filmed Jonathan Wygant, and you guys both filmed the interview with Eric Davis. So, you know, it's always a pleasure having you guys around. And a lot of the cool stuff.
I think there's going to be more of that in the future too. Like if everything plays out correctly, like we're going to do some cool things together here sometime in the future. So
if I ever have the budget to spend money to actually fly you guys out when I need to go places, you have my word. I will.
That's eventually going to happen. Whether it's, you know, our careers converging on certain things or what have you, it's going to happen. I mean, as it stands, we're all going as media to CITD at some point here in the near, like what, 3 months from now, is it something like that?
Gosh,
I got to figure out money for that like ASAP. But you know, at least we don't have to worry about tickets. You know, we got press passes for that. Shouts out to Dan Cleary and the CITD conference team.
Shout out Dan
and Team Night Shift.
Here we go. Is there one main reason that stands out to why we haven't had disclosure? The tech and revenue streams, or NHI, or all of the above? Cheers, Gerb, Kerm, and Rob. I think this is a loaded question.
Yeah.
Money, 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 money. It's all about money, baby, and control.
I think the secrecy we see today is a lot of it is the fallout from the creation of the legacy programs that were essentially created as the Manhattan Project 2.0. And that's not just the technology or race to reverse engineer the technology, but also at the height of the Cold War with the Red Scare. knowing that there are other occupants that aren't just communists that are on this planet that are 4 feet tall, have wraparound almond-shaped eyes and so forth, are now being recovered and spotted and seem to have technology and craft that can outpace our greatest fighters at the time, invoked a lot of need for secrecy during the height of the Cold War. So I think you talked about it earlier, Kermit, that the secrecy is almost like the need to adhere to secrecy guidelines is almost more important than the project work itself.
Yes.
I truly believe that the secrecy has spiraled out of control. And after the programs have morphed and folded, what was once the Manhattan Project 2.0 has just hidden behind so many shadows that, like you said, the secrecy is all encompassing.
Yeah.
And there's some dark truths, I think.
Yes, and just to clarify though, those weren't necessarily my words. Like I didn't just come off the rip. That was, I believe, a Borland comment that he made during his weaponized interview. But again, like that's according to an official source who's testified to Congress on these matters, has direct firsthand knowledge of crimes and illegal behavior. And it's that the need for secrecy supersedes the actual work on these programs itself, and it kind of leads to all these different problems, but it also potentially makes these programs probably less effective than they could be.
Yeah.
So here's a question I've been starting to get a lot more, and we may as well chat about it. What are your thoughts on Peter Thiel? Thiel seems to be very interested in UAPs and is possibly positioned to take over from the legacy program a la Nell's disclosure timeline. So let me just say this. Because I've done, podcasts with Jesse, and Jesse's my friend, a lot of people will always ask me, how's Peter Thiel? I personally think that Jesse is his own man and doesn't adhere to the whims of Peter Thiel, who is not a good person, not in the slightest. But I know a lot of people throw a lot of flack Jesse's way. I personally think that because I know him on a personal level, I think he's his own guy and not a minion of Thiel. But Thiel doesn't seem to be a great guy. You guys might have more nuanced takes than me, just because all of my time is spent in the legacy realm. So I probably don't have as nuanced of takes as you guys.
I have a crazy nuanced take. I will go last because I'm going to go a little long.
Okay, fine. Dang. All right. Now you're really putting me on the spot, Rob, because now it's like
I'm going to get into philosophy.
Whatever I say is it's just going to be completely lost to your glowing prose. No, I would say Thiel's an interesting character. I think we're all kind of like aware of this just because he's connected tangentially to people such as Jesse working for Peter Thiel's family office. I think these are, valid questions that people have been asking, but to the extent of like, is there some type of hidden agenda? Like, I don't know, but I can tell you, I make no money off of UFOs, and I show up on these live streams because I'm boys with Gerb and Rob, and we like to have great times and chase aliens because this is wildly fascinating, and I don't know what else I'd be doing with my time at this point in my life. So I can just tell you for a fact, I don't work for that man. I've never known that man. Just because I work in finance doesn't say that like I think he's some like brilliant person. I think the stuff of like, oh, he's a reptile or he's an alien, that's really funny. I think that's just, like that's kind of half the reason why I think the UFO community is super entertaining. But I don't know. And also to throw shade or to be like, this person isn't credible because they work for this guy. It's like, again, Gerb, to your point, like this is a grown man. Like this is a dude who's like, he has his own life. He makes his own decisions. This isn't like, it's not to say that he's like Thiel's protege. You know what I mean? Like that's not the case. And like people have their own lives and their own interests. And yeah, so
because he worked for him, it seems unlikely Jesse will ever get out of Peter's shadow. And I get it. Thiel's such a, I guess you could say like reprehensible figure. That people are always going to make that connection. But yeah, Rob, what is your extremely nuanced take? Because
sorry, before Rob yaps, I just want to agree with chat. Yes, I do think Peter Thiel's a reptile. If you rearrange the letters in his name, it says the reptile, and that's all I'll say. But sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Okay, so I'm just going to give people a little bit of background on Peter so that you understand where he comes from and what his modus operandi is.
Hey, Rob, we're getting some feedback from your mic. Okay, I think we're good now.
Yeah, he's good.
All right. So I'm sorry, I was a little bit too close there. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on Peter and sort of tell you where he comes from. I think that Jesse and Peter, again, like you mentioned, are two separate people. Peter has his own machinations and ideology to himself, which I will begin to try and unpack for you a little bit. So maybe you can understand what it is that you see from Peter, because I don't believe that Peter has a very deep desire to understand much about the UFO subject. Personally, I don't think that that's where his objective lies. So Peter, when he was younger, began to make a name for himself as sort of a Straussian philosopher at Stanford University. Now, if you know anything about Leo Strauss, the two main components of Leo Strauss's philosophy are the critique of modern culture and the recovery of a classical political philosophy, which is a return to sort of the former nobility era of the world. Okay. So whether you see that as a good thing or a bad thing, and I personally see it as a bad thing, that's on you. But, one of the things that I would say is that Peter went from there and became a derivatives trader at Credit Suisse in the 90s, and then went to a CIA affiliated law firm. He worked at, Sullivan and Cromwell, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And then co-founded his capital management, which, he immediately went into digital payment forms, and then ended up, meeting Elon Musk and working with them. But he wrote this essay in 2007 called The Straussian Moment. And the whole purpose of the essay is basically to summarize his political ideology, which is that his belief that there is a secret, that there should be a secret teaching and secret knowledge for the initiated versus the public teaching for the masses. This is core to his philosophy. And I'm not sure if you guys were aware of this, but it basically his whole concept is that there should be separate levels of knowledge and secret knowledge that requires personal connections and initiation and rituals in order for people to be able to be given access to, and that's the only way that knowledge remains special. So if you apply that lens to the UFO UAP / occultism / antichrist subject that he seems so wrapped up in, that's what it is. It's a societal control mechanism that he seeks to revive in some respect. Now, does helping Jesse's interest in the subject forward that a little bit? Yeah, probably. Is that Jesse's fault? Fuck no.
Rob, I saw a comment that says when Rob said nuanced, he really meant nuanced. And I agree. I think that was a fantastic take. That was really well informed.
Yeah, that was stuff I hadn't thought about before. That was that
just wanted to throw that out there. I've been sitting on that one for a hot
minute. Wow.
Hopefully somebody clips that, because that was a really good take, Rob.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll get through a couple more here. There's some good ones. Which sci-fi movies nails the whole phenomenon the closest, and why is it The Abyss? I definitely agree with The Abyss, and I'm also quite partial to Contact as well with Jodie Foster. I'm sure you guys have seen that. Which nails the phenomenon the closest. I would probably say the upcoming Jerry Bruckheimer produced film will nail the phenomenon the closest, as far as the legacy aspect.
Yeah, I mean, there's a movie with, oh God, it's Kyle MacLachlan. Kyle MacLachlan is Jesse Marcel, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, really?
Young Jesse Marcel. It was on Sci-Fi Network for a long time. I remember John Ramirez sending me clips of this movie, and I had to end up watching the whole thing. But it's about Roswell, but not a movie, but a mini series. My wife made me watch this. It was American Horror Story. Was that it? Yeah, there was an American Horror Story UFO mini series that they did, which I highly recommend to anybody to watch because it integrates a lot of really crazy aspects of the lore. And even covers the Forrestal suicide and a bunch of other things. That's a fun one. But when we talk about the whole phenomenon, it's got to be Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yes.
Covers government conspiracy. It covers orbs. It covers all the different types of interactions. Or you could also look at Fire in the Sky, which is that's a traumatic movie to watch if you're a kid.
Yes, it is. I will always love in Close Encounters the TRW and Lockheed crates. You can't really see it. you can't see it with the focus of the camera right now, but behind me, I have some TRW ads from the early to mid 1980s about TRW's rapid prototyping, and a Lockheed Corporation saying your office is your new home. And it's the cockpit of, I can't remember what vehicle, but, and right behind my head is a nice BDM ad from the mid 80s.
Nice.
So
Sick.
we'll get through 3 more. How about that? And then we'll close up shop. Clancy Pants, thank you, my friend. Can FOIA in Australia be useful? I'm a bit of a doomer, pessimistic on FOIA in general. I think Rob said this once. FOIA is an appeasement process. Am I quoting you correctly, Rob?
Yeah. FOIA, for the most part, is an appeasement process for allowing the public to see certain things. And when you do get good things through FOIA, it's usually because somebody fucked up. Just to put that out there, sorry for the language, but like, I'm not the biggest fan of FOIA. I also believe that FOIA, in a certain sense, can also bring a target down on something you're trying to find out about. It's sort of like calling your shot, like, hey, I'm investigating this. Would you please tell me more, please? And they can be like, oh, you're investigating this? Nothing to see here. Move along. And then they move all the assets. You know what I mean? So like a lot of times when I'm really like trying to drill down on something, I'm not sure that I want to place a FOIA request in for certain aspects of certain programs. Certain people don't need to be alerted that people are looking into that.
Yeah.
But like with regards to Australian FOIA, that's probably a better question for somebody like Ross or like Reese or somebody else.
Grant Levac as well. I know he's an active
Grant would
Australian
be a good guy
researcher.
to talk to too.
Yeah.
Guys, with that, actually, we'll start to wrap up. Can I get an outro from each of you? Can you tell everybody where to find you guys and where to stay tuned with the awesome things and Kerm's awesome? I know you have some great memes on Twitter as well. So where can people find you guys?
Yeah, well, you can find me at KermDawg, that's spelled KermDawg, because I spell like that, ENT, which stands for entertainment, not ear, nose, and throat. Gravity Faults, no, it's entertainment. I came up with the name. I know what it means. I actually have a slide deck prepared on said UFO memes if we want to go through that at the end.
All right, show it in your outro. Show the outro.
Okay.
So we're wrapping up, and then let me say this real fast, as Rob, if you don't mind, just real fast. In the in the post I made on YouTube, I know I asked for questions for the Q&A. There are a ton there. I'm sorry if your question didn't get answered. We'll address it next time because there's a lot of great questions. So I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. Rob?
I just want to say you guys can find me on Twitter at Burning Rob. I do have a Substack account, although I've been very hesitant to publish additional research there, mostly because I'm trying to secure a position with a major corporation here that I've got to interview for tomorrow. I don't want to talk too much about that, but it's very exciting. Hopefully that can lead to some cool things, but bunch of exciting projects coming up. Some things I can't talk about, like I mentioned early in the stream. You might see me on some other major podcasts here relatively soon because I've got some appearances that I've got to fly out to make. So please keep an eye out for me. And I appreciate you guys supporting us, especially to the folks who have supported me through Substack and Patreon. You guys have made a pretty big material difference in my life, so I do appreciate that.
I just got to say before we get into the memes, I'll every now and then watch a live stream in the topic, and I just got to shout out everybody in the chat. There's always great conversations in here, and it honors me that everybody here is so cool and always has something to add in the chat. So I love that because I see a lot of trollers and memers and other chats. So it does mean the most to me that you guys are so on topic and focused. I really do appreciate it. With that, and with our meme review out of the way, thank you all so much for joining. Rob and Kerm, if you guys will just stay on for a moment once I end the stream so that it can upload, please do that. And again, thank you guys so much for joining today. We'll figure out a regular thing as far as stuff over on my end. I know I said this in the announcement, but my newest project is just around the corner. And again, I gave some allusions as to some of the content within that project. It's a tiny part because I promise you I tried to make this shorter than the Air Force project, but it should still be about 2.5 hours if I am on the right track. But talking about possibly directed energy weapons used at some legacy program sites or unacknowledged legacy program sites, from encounters from urbexers, urban explorers, or various hikers that have stumbled upon these ranges and have claimed to encounter some rather interesting effects. But that's not what the video is about. As I've been talking so much today with the David Grush, Megan Kelly interview, I would expect some of the stuff that is said in there to arise within the video. But with that being said, guys, thank you all so much, and we'll catch you all next time, and I will see everybody hopefully on the next video. Thank you, guys.
Thanks
Thanks for
everyone.
hanging out, everybody.